Hello, survivors, and welcome to the Zombicide Fans Podcast, where we discuss and review all Zombicide games. I'm Ryan.
I'm Schmedley.
And I'm James.
And today we're joined by our special guest, Nate Parks, aka Eldil on Board Game Geek, where his contributions include house rules for Invader and cheerleading for White Death with line graphs. Hey, Nate, thanks for joining us.
Thank you. It's a pleasure to be here.
Yeah, it's great to have you, man. Okay, so today we'll be doing our review and discussion about Zombicide Invader, the core game. And just some quick reminders for listeners, head on over to website zombicidefans.com, where there's a ton of amazing community-submitted content, custom missions, survivors, heroes, zombies, equipment, variants, house rules, templates, you name it, all kinds of goodies, free to use, free to sign up, and submit your custom stuff as well. You can also find links to that in our Discord and Facebook group on the site and in the show notes. Also, the mission templates and map editor that I shared last time, by the time this episode drops, I will have the Zombicide Invader also available there, so you can make templates. And again, you can find that in zombicidefans.com. All right. Cool. So Nate, what kind of board and tabletop gamer are you?
Well, I started, I think it was around 2009 or something, with a game called Dream Blade, which was basically like if Magic the Gathering and chess had a baby, and it was a nightmare, and it got abandoned after 18 months, which sounds like a real sad story. But it was this super cool game. It got me really into games. And from there, I went to Gen Con. I started playing Euro games. I played Netrunner. I played Monster Apocalypse, just all sorts of games. But in the last 5 years or so, I've moved and I've got kids. I've gotten into a lot of the like solo co-op games, CMON miniature games. I jumped into CMON through the Eric Lang trilogy. Like,
yeah.
We tried Blood Rage. We loved Blood Rage. We tried Rising Sun, probably my favorite game ever. And then, from there, I jumped into a Zombicide campaign. I've done this and that. And so that's my main gaming right now. Aside from having recently played Slay the Spire, the board game, I had to order a copy of that because I'm really excited for that one.
Nice. That's based off a video game, right?
Yeah. It's an excellent rendition of a video card game into an actual card game.
Oh, yeah. That's that roguelite kind of card game-like game. Yeah, I love that game. That's great. All right. So what got you into Zombicide?
So my first Zombicide experience was at a con, and it was a bad one. I played Modern. I was one player at a table of 6. I didn't fully understand the rules. I died on a double runner activation, which is not a thing I knew could happen. So it was basically like, oh, hope you enjoyed that 90 minutes. It's over now. Walk away. And I was like, well, that's good. I don't like Zombicide. That's something I know. And then I forgot what turned around. It's White Death that caught my attention. And when I looked at White Death, and I started to really look at it, because I loved everything about White Death. I loved the core theming of the battlements. I loved all the stretch goals, the like sort of scattered fragments of the Eastern Army being driven before this zombie Mongol horde. It was all chef's kiss to me. And so I got into it, but I ordered a copy of Black Plague to see, do I actually like this system? And I did. And then so I backed the Kickstarter. Then I bought some Green Horde and some retail expansions, and then wound up getting off of Game Steward a full Invader pledge. And that's been my Zombicide experience. And it's 99% me playing all 6 survivors myself. And it's just, I am surprised by how much I've enjoyed it. The gameplay really gets out of its own way. It's so charmingly simple. Like, there are no tokens. I know people complain about the noise tokens and they are fiddly, but that's the most fiddly thing about Zombicide. We're like, I came from playing Gloomhaven, which I liked, but Gloomhaven, good Lord, the amount of cardboard you have to push, the amount of like, you get halfway through the game and like, wait, have we been doing the elemental track at all? Wait, wasn't I supposed to shuffle those cards into my deck? There's so many elements. And Zombicide, there's almost nothing between you and the gameplay. And so that's just, I got into it and I really enjoy it, and here I am on a Zombicide podcast.
Nice. Do you have any have you picked a favorite or least favorite yet? Is it too soon?
Well, I knew you were going to ask me this, and that was the sad thing, is my least favorite is Modern, because I only played it once and I kind of hated it. I think if I returned to it now, I would be like, oh, that's cool, I like it, but like,
Which was it, first or second edition? Did you
I think it
specify?
was second edition. There were dashboards.
All right.
This was fairly recently, so I assume it was second edition. But I would probably enjoy it if I go back now. It was more about like understanding the context of the game, what the risks and the rewards are.
Mm-hmm.
I haven't played, honestly, I haven't played a version of Zombicide I've really gotten into that I haven't really liked. Black Plague and the medieval line and Invader kind of jump back and forth as my favorite. Whichever one I'm playing at the moment is my favorite. But just before you contacted me, I was in the middle of like a Green Horde scenario, one of my first, and just getting annihilated and being like, this is really cool and hard. Like just a bunch of freaked out people pushing a catapult trying to survive. It's like ridiculous, and I enjoyed it a lot.
Nice. We'd love to hear more about or what you're currently up to.
In terms of stuff I'm doing right now, I've been on Board Game Beat tweaking some rules for like constructing the Invader spawn deck in the way that some other people have done, that sort of brings it into line with some of the advancements in I think Undead or Alive and White Death, just to sustain what I think is like the challenge of the core set, which can get diluted when you start adding all the stuff into it. Beyond that, I've been playing with a lot of little house rules myself, some of which I'm hesitant to share because they're fiddly, but like sometimes I play Invader missions with limited ammo. I use little D6s and I track ammo, and people run out of ammo and they have to run and search again. And it makes the game harder and it makes the game more fiddly. But I also really like the impact of being like, this is a really great gun and it has 2 bullets in it. What am I going to do? Or the thing where like I find a weapon, and in my little house rules, like, if you find a weapon, you can either roll to see how many bullets are in that gun. It's just a D6,
Right.
Anywhere from 1 to 6. Or you can give it to someone who has that weapon to fully reload it. So it's like, oh, this is either a full set of ammo for someone who has this gun, or a partially loaded gun I can use myself. Now, I always go back to Aliens. Aliens is the movie I want this game to be.
Right.
I love Aliens and I really like this game. And a big part of Aliens is running out of ammo. It's some of the most terrifying moments when you're facing off against the aliens. Like Ripley is taking out all these aliens and they literally keep cutting the display of ammo. You remember that?
Yeah. Oh yeah.
In the
I love
movie?
that.
Like,
Well, all I could say is, definitely welcome to Zombicide. Like, I think a lot of us that get really hardcore into it is just start making custom stuff like this. It's really great to hear you coming into that already.
well, it's kind of the similar thing if you play Dungeons and Dragons 5th edition. One of the biggest strengths of the 5th edition was that it was such a great template for people just to do their own thing, right?
Yeah.
And I think that's a big strength of Zombicide. There's so little to get in your way of making your own rules, or making a rule that you'll talk about in BGG and everyone will disagree with. And you know what? It doesn't matter because it's your game.
Right. Yeah, exactly. Yeah. And, Simon's always supported that. They're like, it's a sandbox. Here's a bunch of custom. By the way, on zombicide.com, you can find tons of like blank cards that you can use to make stuff if you haven't checked that out already. All right. So we got some mail. We got some mail in, some comments and things. So last episode we talked about, I was like, hey, asking the audience, how are we doing? What do you like about the show? What don't you like? And like a specific question I had is like, how do you feel about the length of the show? Because again, like a lot of people in my life have been like, that's too long. 2 hours is too long. But I wanted to see from our real audience, from like our actual hardcore audience. And so far, I've only heard that people are happy with it. A bunch of people commented on YouTube, some people at Discord. So thank you for that. And keep the comments coming. Keep helping us improve. We want to hear from you for sure. And I haven't heard anybody say from the contrary yet. Like, actually, yeah, it's too long. I haven't heard any of that yet. But it might be out there. So speak up. And then so from the mailbag, so you can contact us at zombicidefans@gmail.com. We got an email from Zombear64. And he asks, or they ask, do you know any easy ways to make Zombicide 2nd edition maps on a Mac? Well, the mission the Figma mission templates and map editor I've got will get you covered. I don't have the 2nd edition in there yet, so wait a little bit, but check our YouTube channel. Just search for Zombicide Fans, and then you'll find a video I posted for just in a quick little overview of that software. It's free software. You can use it on the browser, of course, so you can use it on Windows or Mac, and it's got all kinds of editions. And my big goal is to have it for all Zombicides, but 2nd edition is coming. So we'll get you covered there. And also Zombears just went on to say that they love every podcast episode we put out. So thank you, Zombear. Toby H writes in from the tiny hillside village of Turweston. I'm probably butchering that, deep in the British countryside, which is just delightful. I want to go there. I want to live there.
Hey, what you like there?
Yeah. So Toby mentions they prefer a longer podcast. So thank you for that. And they also mentioned that, first exposed to Marvel Zombies in 2024, then grabbed Undead or Alive, then Night of the Living Dead, then Deceased, and then probably Army of the Dead next. So like, there's definitely a trend here, right? And then Toby's question is, if you could pitch a brand new edition of Zombicide with a theme or franchise of your choice, what would you pick? And Toby's pick was he would love a quasi-futuristic Tokyo or an adaptation of the Dark Carnival mythology from the music of ICP. But anyway, yeah, if you could pick a new edition of Zombicide with a theme or franchise of your choice, what would you pick, Schmedley?
So, and this is something I've been saying ever since the reveal of like what White Death was. I thought it was very interesting that they were continuing fantasy, but going a completely different direction, still keeping it compatible. Now, I've always said I would love for them to do that with sci-fi, but let's see what's still happening on Earth. Maybe it's more like cyberpunky. It's still compatible. It's still sci-fi. It's in the same setting, but like the core that it's pulling from is completely different. So I always thought, which is very similar to what they said. I'm sorry, what was the name? Toby,
yeah.
To what you said with the more sci-fi kind of dark.
Yeah, like quasi-futuristic Tokyo.
Yeah.
Yeah. That's cool.
James?
Yeah, keeping in line with the subject of today with Invader, I would love to see them come out with Invader second Kickstarter centered around the IP of Starship Troopers. I think that would be really cool. And I'm talking about the movie, not the books. I mean, if you want to do the books, that's cool. I got nothing against them, but the movie itself, those bugs are just awesome.
Love it.
And, the human characters looking a little bit more like soldiers as opposed to just guys in Space Marine armor. There's a lot of cool stuff I think you could do with that, with all different kinds of new enemies that you could put in there. And it would give you the opportunity to kind of get the rule set updated to kind of take into account some of the new stuff that's come out since Invader. So yeah, Starship Troopers would probably be mine.
The only good bug is a dead bug.
You better believe it. Nate, do you like bugs?
There in Invader, so.
Man, what a loaded question for such a satirical movie. Boy, so I love what you both said. And that's the trick, is I started to scratch my brain for like, what do I want? And what I really want is White Death or Invader. Those are just my two dream things. So the one thing that popped in my head, which I think aesthetically might be really cool, the dust miniatures, like the Weird War II stuff they did for Zombicide. And that, but maybe even roll it back into World War I. I think there was even there was recently like a miniature, maybe a war game or something that really dove into like World War I aesthetic, but with like weirdness and magic and that sort of stuff. I think Zombicide set against the backdrop of World War I could have a lot of cool visual and thematic grips in it.
Yeah. I have such a hard time with this. Like, I'm not that creative, I think, when it comes to like just total blue sky. So I'm going to steal something that I've seen people say online a couple times, like a pirate theme. Just throw something in there different.
I'm a pirate theme hater. I don't want a pirate theme. I think it'd be lame.
Fair enough.
I had a suspicion that was going to be the fourth version of medieval, like it was going to be like Red Tide or something, because
Red Tide's a good name for it.
You've had Black Plague, Green Horde, White Death, and Red Tide. I feel like it fits in. The timing's a little off. Pirates are a little past the medieval era, but they're
Simon's listening. Hire this guy. That's great. Sorry, go ahead.
I think coming off of White Death, a lot of people said Greek myth would be cool because they're going a more mythic route with White Death versus kind of folklore was the original, less gods and deities and stuff. But they're going very
I know
with it.
You actually made me think of mine that I thought of before, but I forgot. Ancient Egypt.
Ancient Egypt would be awesome.
That would be so fun.
Yeah, that'd be a really good one. On the pirate theme, I certainly am all for a pirate theme game. I think it would make just as much sense, though, to base it off of Undead or Alive. I think if you did a second Kickstarter for that and take it back, I know, it's a little bit before the Old West, but still you got guys with guns and still guys with, hand weapons and whatnot. I think it could be fun from that.
All right, let's jump into the news. Let me get this up here. So we don't have much this time. We have a Deceased update, and they're just showing off an update number 108 on Kickstarter, probably in GameFound too. Omega Pack plastic samples. So they're just showing off the Omega Pack box and like the insert with Giganta. She is quite gigantic. I wonder if she's bigger than the Giant Man from Marvel. She kind of seems like she is, but I don't know. But it'll be cool to have them together for sure. And there's a Daily Planet globe and some other cool stuff. Light posts, what's it called? A smashed up phone booth. So that's really great. I love any terrain, official terrain they'll throw into a Zombicide game. I am here for.
They've been going very hard on that in the superhero ones in bases. I've seen a lot of mixed opinions on terrain on the bases, so I'm curious if that'll be something we see in non-superhero stuff, or if that's just because they're so individual.
All right, and then one more thing, small thing. Right before we started recording this podcast, like literally, we got our 1,000th member on the All Zombicide Games Facebook group. So yay, and which is awesome because like I've only started that in September of last year with the plan to, use it as a launching platform and place that I knew that I could like post about the podcast and not get like booted or whatever. But so far, all of the other Facebook groups or all the other Zombicide groups on Facebook have been really great about like letting me post when there's podcast episodes dropping and all of that. So thank you to all of those wonderful groups. And yeah, to our own All Zombicide Games Facebook group, kind of the official Zombicide fans Facebook group. And of course there's the Discord, which is amazing, which is long standing and it's a great part of the community. All right, that's it for the news. Coming up, the review for Zombicide Invader core game. Check out Board Game Goodies and save 10% with coupon code podcast at the URL boardgamegoodies.shop, where you'll find various game upgrades and accessories, including the new Zombicide Invader Kickstarter insert designed to store literally all products from the Zombicide Invader campaign, including Darkside, Black Ops, all Kickstarter exclusives and add-ons, with room for Project Elite and Alone crossovers and comic book extras, all in just 3 boxes. Board Game Goodies' approach is to optimize speed of setup and convenience of gameplay. There are trays and holders for literally everything: tokens, dice, 3D doors, deck and discard trays for cards, card storage with dividers, slotted Survivor and Abomination storage, and trays for easy in and out of several models of all of the Horde enemies: Xenos, Drillers, Flingers, Xenomorph Seekers, and even Biters from Project Elite. There are a bunch more goodies for other Zombicide games, as well as other games like Massive Darkness and Cthulhu Death May Die, and more. Listeners can save 10% with coupon code PODCAST over at boardgamegoodies.shop.
Humans set off into the stars in search of high-powered fuel and found it in the remote corner of the universe on the small planet BKL-7. Their discovery of xenium, a dark, oily compound deep below the planet's surface, was everything they hoped for. But they found something else too. The Xenos' attack was brutal and unrelenting. While the scientists and soldiers have held them off the best they could, the Xenos are still coming.
All right, here's your quick overview of the rules for Zombicide Invader. Zombicide Invader is a cooperative game in which 1 to 6 players take on the role of survivors to face off against swarms of infected Xenos in a sci-fi setting. Survivors find weapons and items, control bots and sentry guns, battle tons of Xenos, and gain experience. The more experience they get, the more powerful they become, but the more Xenos rise from the mold to face them. In a game of Zombicide Invader, the goal for each mission is to complete the mission objectives with all survivors standing, plus each mission's unique mission objectives. So each round of the game has a player phase, enemy phase, and end phase. On a player's turn, their survivor can perform up to 3 actions. They can move, search, perform a door action. For free, once per turn, a survivor may place or remove a closed door token on a door opening in the survivor's zone. You can reorganize or trade equipment. Combat action that's melee or ranged. A survivor may perform a concentrated attack by designating a single miniature as the target and then applies the weapon's damage value for each success obtained. So you roll 3 dice, you get 3 successes. With the 1 damage weapon, you've dealt 1 miniature 3 damage. You could take or activate an objective token. You can make noise. You could do nothing. And you can machine actions is an action. So if a survivor has a skill or has acquired a purple or green token that they you can use to control the corresponding machine, they can go ahead and do that. Attack or move with bots, or just attack with a sentry gun. Those are the different types. You can also sort of mount a sentry gun by being in its zone and control it that way. And then it's the Xenos phase. In this case, the Xenos on the board activate. They attack a survivor if they can. If not, they move to the nearest survivor they can see or the noisiest zone on the board. Then after that, you spawn new Xenos on every spawn zone on the board. And then for every kill that a survivor gets, their XP increases. Once XP reaches certain thresholds, number of kills, it gives the survivor more skills and it amps the game up from blue to yellow, then orange, then red danger levels. The higher the level, the more Xenos will spawn. This version of Zombicide features workers, aka walkers, hunters, aka runners, tanks, aka fatties/brutes, and abominations. Tanks deal 2 damage and abominations deal 3 damage. In the core box, there's only one type of abomination. It's the spoiler abomination. What's unique about this one is that whenever it moves onto interior zones, it spreads mold. Xenos spawn from that mold, and if 2 or more spawn zones are linked by an uninterrupted chain of active mold zones, you lose the game. Okay, there's obviously a bit more to the rules, but that's just a quick overview. And now we're going to go ahead and dive into our discussion and review.
All right, so I have some stats here for Invader. It was part of the first and so far only campaign in Zombicide's sci-fi setting, which was the second attempt at branching out of the modern setting after the success of Zombicide Fantasy, science fiction, of course, being the logical next step. The campaign ran from April to May of 2018, and in that time, it gained over 18,000 backers and raised $3.3 million, which does put it pretty far behind the $5 million raised by Green Horde, the most recent campaign at the time. And that makes it the first Zombicide campaign to not break any records, possibly the earliest sign of some backers getting a little bit of campaign fatigue from the franchise that would come up again later. But if we head over to Board Game Geek, that sentiment is not reflected by its reception after the campaign, because with an average score of 7.8 from almost 3,000 reviews, it does rank higher than any large box Zombicide product that released before it. And I have to say, I agree with them wholeheartedly. I think Zombicide Invader is the best Zombicide. What are your guys' opinions on that before we jump into specifics? Anyone want to fight me on that?
Oh, it'll come.
Oh yeah? All right. Let's get
That's fascinating stats. I did not know that because basically the sentiment online I see doesn't really reflect that score. That's interesting.
Yeah. I was going to say that too. And also I would agree with you. This is absolutely the best Zombicide game without zombies in it too.
Yeah, I mean, thematically, we'll get into it a little bit more, but it's so interesting from a story perspective to have a zombie apocalypse that humans are immune to. It's also just the other thing to note from that is that this is the 6th campaign, and it's the first time Zombicide didn't make more than the last campaign. That's a very impressive run.
It had to happen sometime.
Yeah. So I mean, it's not that it was inevitable, but it's weird that it was this one, considering it ranks higher than Green Horde, which was record shattering.
That's wild. Yeah, so
only a little bit. I think Green Horde was 7.7. So
I think this was also a pretty big swing. I made a list of all the new mechanics. There's a ton of new mechanics in here. It was the first one not to have that art style that was associated. Instead, it was like Adrian Smith. It wasn't zombies. It was it was a big swing, and it might not have hit for a lot of people.
Yeah, when I was introducing this game, many times I would tell people Zombicide Invader, it's so cool. And there was almost a groan, oh, another Zombicide. For whatever reason, people get fatigued by Zombicides coming out every year, every couple of years. It's nobody's complaining about FIFA. Nobody's complaining about the Madden, the next, Madden or whatever the NBA.
Call of Duty.
People are complaining.
Yeah, Call of Duty.
It's not the people who are buying it.
Yeah. Yeah. But so I would tell people look, it doesn't even have zombies in it. It's crazy. I was and I keep my pitch is always they should have just called it Xenocide because it just has Xenos, just aliens who got infected or something.
I mean, they are zombies only if you read the lore. They are zombies. They're just not human zombies, and humans are immune to the virus.
Yeah. Yeah, Xenocide. That'd have been interesting.
I imagine it would have sold even less.
Yeah. Yeah.
Yeah, it's probably true.
I mean, look at Dead Keep. You know, if they had
Yeah.
just called it Zombicide Fantasy Light, it would have sold probably twice as much.
Yeah. Yeah, it's
I hope
probably
they
true.
continue with that. That's such a cool idea.
So what makes this version of Zombicide unique mechanics-wise? We already talked about it a little bit.
So the first thing that comes to mind is obviously concentrated fire is a unique mechanic introduced in this one, where if you roll a number of dice, if you have a series of targets, you can choose one. You have to declare it before you roll, and all of your dice now apply to that, multiplying the damage number, which is still present. And it affects the identity of the game to such a high degree, even where you might not notice it at first. Because I don't know if you guys notice when playing, there are no one dice weapons in this game. There are 0 weapons that roll 1 die. Even the sniper rifle, even the starter weapons roll 2 dice.
Yeah, I didn't realize that.
Yeah.
I think the
think
sniper
actually the
rifle is just
sniper
one
rifle-
die.
Yep.
Is it 2 damage?
It's 2 damage.
It's 2 damage.
Okay.
But it's only 1 die.
Got
Okay,
it.
I stand corrected. There's 1, 2 if you include the prototype. Ruins my point a little bit. But the main point is, because of that, it removes brutes, tanks in this one, as a damage gate completely. There are 0 weapons that cannot kill a brute. A tank in this one. A tank. Because, I mean, some weapons are pretty hard, but instead of being a damage gate, now the challenge is you can only kill 1 at a time. So when 4 show up, it's still a problem. But I think that's a much more interesting dynamic. And there's also, like, most of the weapons can kill an abomination. Way higher percentage than normal.
I actually ran the numbers on all of these because I was curious.
Yeah.
And yes, it's ostensibly possible for like most combination of weapons to kill an abomination, but there are low hits and higher hits. Like
It is true.
I would not, if there's the light machine gun is the one that you roll 5 dice, but it only hits on a 5. Real cool. I would not spend your turn trying to take out an
But
abomination.
I'd argue, and it's weird because I'm not normally a fan of high randomness, but I think it's much cooler to, especially in this kind of like you're a big action hero kind of, that's the character archetype, to be like, I have this gun that fires a lot, and I have this giant guy. I'm going to go fire at him for my whole turn until he goes down.
Yep.
And that's not really something you can do without that high degree of randomness, without that small chance of success.
The way I tend to think of the impact of that between the great equipment deck and the concentrated attack, my experience with other Zombicides, particularly Black Plague, it's like those games are like Alien, the original one. Your survivors, at least in the beginning, are helpless. They're running, they're improvising weapons, they're terrified, and they die really quickly because they're ultimately helpless. Like, and you play Black Plague, you open the door at blue and the abomination is there, you're just going to run away because there's nothing you can do. This game is Aliens. You're rolling in with the Colonial Marines, and you're going to be so cocky. You're going to have your, like, phase lances and your underbarrel grenade launchers, and you're going to think you're so great, and it will tear you apart. But it's going to be just a different experience that way.
Sure.
I think this attempt at this is one of 2 big things that they did, listening to feedback from their previous 5 Kickstarters and listening to how people wanted things to change. And I really want my weapons to be able to do something no matter what, even if it's a low chance. I think this is one of those, be careful what you wish for, because I really think that this completely changes the game to making it the easiest version of Zombicide that's out there. The fact that you can kill abominations with starting weapons, that's just as bad to me as, getting +1 damage at blue with your characters. I mean,
don't think the starting weapons can kill abominations. It's not hard to find weapons that can, though.
No, you absolutely can. All you do is you take your girl with Lucky, you give her both of the cattle prods, or you give her both of the SMGs, and guess what?
Oh,
She
with
can
dual
kill an
wielding?
abomination.
Sure.
Yeah. I mean, it's just not when you don't even have to search to be able to kill everything that's on the board.
Wow,
I think that's a big problem.
I'm not that smart.
Trading, yeah.
I'm not that smart. I wouldn't have ever.
I've never traded starting weapons around to have people dual wield them. I don't think I've ever done that.
Based on the numbers I've run, that's not a gambit I would do. Like, if I was like, there's an abomination, I think I'm gonna run and search and close some doors before I try to. I mean, that's a cool thing. Like, if you're in a desperate situation, that might be your only angle. It's like, give both cattle prods to the Space Marine lady with the lucky trait, and let's hope we get lucky.
That's actually a good transition into another big mechanical change, a much more subtle one, is that no doors start close, but you have the ability to close any of them. And that's kind of unique to this one. That one doesn't even come back like Concentrated Fire does. I don't end up utilizing it that much, but it does come up.
Yeah, so there's only one mission that I played out of the 11 that are in the rule book where I even used that rule. And I think that it was tactically sound too. And then there's only 3 missions that even include doors starting on the map. So, I mean, to me, doors just are almost an afterthought in this game. It is very different from any previous Zombicide before, because the normal flow of a game is you go open a door to a building to find out all the bad stuff is inside. But in this one, the bad stuff's just already inside.
Yeah.
I did play this with a group, I think 2 weekends ago. They had not played Zombicide before, and I did explain the door mechanic, and they were using it a decent amount. And it was really cool to watch it impact the game. And I think coming from a Black Plague scenario, or a Black Plague experience, it's my first Zombicide experience, I think sometimes it falls under my radar. But the ability to basically say, like, now you see me, now you don't, and to shut off line of sight with a zombie, with an alien, so it defaults to chasing the loudest noise instead of the thing it can see, it's pretty cool.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, it's really cool. And one of the selling points that they had for this was, when the Kickstarter campaign came out, was it was a faster setup, right? Like, you don't have to go through and set up all the doors. You know, just have 5 doors off to the side that you need to keep handy in case you want to use them.
And so this is like their first attempt at that. The second attempt was just printing doors on the maps. But I think the reason it doesn't come up very much compared to other games that have a similar mechanic is that zombies move really slowly in Zombicide. That's like part of if there was more hunters, this game's version of runners, then I feel like closing doors to stall them for a turn would be a much bigger deal.
Yeah, also just how easy they are for mold to take care of. Obviously, we'll get into mold later, but, you know, just mold instantly destroying doors makes it almost not even worth the time of putting them out on the board. I mean, it's nice that it doesn't take you an action to close the door, but that, I think that also kind of shows you how they're just very situational and for the most part kind of worthless.
Yeah. And speaking of mold, you mentioned that the abominations live and die a lot faster. The default abomination in this game, the spoiler abomination, has one of the weirdest unique mechanics of any abomination, even not including core games. And he changes the terrain of the game. He can make you lose the mission by destroying objectives. He creates new spawn points as he walks. And all of it is just, it's because he doesn't fulfill, we talked about last time about how abominations are supposed to be something you run from and necromancers are supposed to be something you kill as fast as possible. But this guy, because of Concentrated Fire, kind of has to be both.
Yep.
Yeah.
So
and he keeps coming back so often.
12 abomination cards. It's more than any other game.
Yeah.
I'd say the spoiler abomination is probably one of my favorite abominations across the franchise. He might take the top spot, but he does also have the unique problem that he gets worse the more abominations there are.
Yes. Yeah. But yeah,
because he needs to show up repeatedly.
Oh, yeah.
Yeah, I love
diluting the. Yeah, go ahead, Brian. Sorry.
Oh, sorry. Yeah, I love the whole mold and spoiler abomination thing. Like, there's so much involved with all of that, you know, because like the more mold there is, of course, the more mold spawns you'll get, and those, you know, triggering like mold spawn cards for the regular spawn deck, and there's so many in the equipment deck, and sometimes it's downright terrifying to search for equipment.
Cards where you search and one worker shows up. That's not a thing in this game because that wouldn't be a threat. What is a threat is now there's 2 hunters on every mold, and there might be 10 mold.
Yeah.
So, like, to put this in context, because this actually happened to me, this is a game where you can search, and because you searched, there are now 20 workers on the board. All abominations get an additional activation, and you have spawned an additional abomination. because you searched.
It's wild.
Like, there is no equivalent threat level in any Zombicide game I've played where you can do that much harm by getting unlucky in your search. It's wild.
Yeah. In previous versions of Zombicide, you're more likely to kill yourself searching, but in this game, you're more likely to kill your friends. If you're, it's because if they end up on a mold zone or something, then obviously it's bad news. Which brings me back to searching in this game. You shouldn't be searching a lot in this game. Like I said, you can kill almost anything with your starting weapons, and bad things can happen when you search.
When searching, I think in the normal non-epic deck, it's prototype weapons in this. The very high power level for the weapons, you can roll. We already talked about this a little bit. You can find chain swords and miniguns with escalation, like the kind which is literally a gun that in other editions is an epic weapon, but that's just in the normal deck. So there's definitely a high risk, high reward for searching. And also, like, the prototype weapons, I feel like, have a very small increase in power from those compared to other editions, probably to compensate for that. Which is another thing we haven't talked about a whole lot, is that prototype weapons in this, another new mechanic, the epic weapons in this game work pretty differently because you don't just need to find them. First of all, this is the first time that finding any objective will get them, which is a mechanic that comes back a lot later. Anytime you pick up an objective, usually another mechanic we haven't talked about somehow yet is the bots, but usually anytime you pick up an objective, you'll get a prototype weapon, but that won't. Another reason you have to search, maybe trigger a mold spawn, is because you need a energy cell for it, which is an equivalent. There's also plenty of bullets, an equivalent to plenty of bullets for energy weapons. But it also needs to be used for the prototype weapons to work at all.
Yeah, it's interesting. This is the first time. Is this the first time? It's kind of how you look at it, like that they've had two different class of weapons. Like outside of
shells in. So there was technically bullets and shells, I think. Oh wait, was there? Maybe there wasn't. There was
Are you
bolts and
talking about
arrows
the ammo types, Ryan?
Yeah. With the ammo types, so you have your energy-based weapons that you can use energy cells for, and then you have your ammunition weapons that you can use bullets for. So is that
arrows and bolts and
there were arrows and bolts. Were there bullets and shells in first edition, or did they not?
Yeah, it's light ammo and heavy ammo in classic. But to Ryan's point though, there wasn't any way to get rerolls on melee weapons. Before this game. So the power cells giving cattle prods or chainsaws rerolls. That's a pretty big deal.
That is pretty cool. I don't even think that comes back very often. Rerolls on melee as an equipment card.
And this ties into another unique mechanic for this game, which I think is really cool, is the two environments that you are inside, you go through the airlock, and once you're outside the airlock, you can't fire your bullet weapons. They don't work outside. So suddenly you need energy weapons. Aside from prototype weapons, all the energy weapons are melee. So like you have to have a plan, because also it's wild. It doesn't. I think I'm trying to think of another game where it happens where you can be standing by the airlock and you can't see into the airlock. You can't use ranged weapons. So you have to have a plan to get through the other airlock if there's aliens.
And that's probably another reason the prototype weapons are just a pretty minor buff in power compared to theirs, because they're all equivalents of main deck weapons, but they're usually like an additional die, or I think sometimes that's it.
Yeah, I think like the heavy shotgun one, same number of dice, but more range.
I think the sniper rifle has
more
one more range too.
More range. I like that you have to work for just that element of difference. Like you have to work for getting outside if you don't already have oxygen tanks based on the scenario. Sometimes you start with them, sometimes you have to go find them.
That's another like kind of underused mechanic, like the doors, is because I think we went through it 2 of the 11 missions that involve outside. You need to go find oxygen. It has a whole deck and a whole blurb about it in the rules, but it's so underused. Yeah,
I agree. And then it's just cool having the, like as Nate was saying, like having those different environments. Speaking of oxygen tanks, so like another unique thing about this is like these uniquely printed rooms, right? So you have Like, this is maybe the first time in Zombicide history up to this point. I don't know. You tell me, because I haven't played Green Horde yet. Where like the actual room printed has a feature on it that matters. Oxygen rooms where you have to get oxygen tanks. You've got your security rooms that only soldiers can only search for equipment in those security rooms.
So the class thing I think is really cool, and it shows they keep this kind of thing going further and further, expand it. But I really do like the idea that you've got these big bad tough guys. Well, what makes them big bad and tough? Well, they got an extra wound. Versus, your little weak guys that aren't in armor or just not good fighters. But you're also giving the little weak guys, something that they can do differently that the soldiers can't do. So I think that's fun.
Small places, looking low coverage and stuff. I imagine in that big bulky armor, because the mechanical difference is that soldiers, like we said, can only search in red rooms, security rooms, and civilians can search everywhere. And I imagine that's because it's kind of hard to move in that big armor. So if there's a gun on the ground, maybe you can't bend over and pick it up.
I got to be honest with you, Schmedley, I never thought of it in those terms when you said, getting into the low places and crawling into holes and everything. And now that's all I can picture is little characters. I always just pictured in my head that the soldiers were just too dumb.
I always thought it was just like, well, the security room is like literally an armory, right? Like you open the case and there's just a line of weapons. But the rest of the complex is ostensibly non-military, but civilians are just hiding guns everywhere. So the soldiers don't know where to look, but the civilians are like bonk bonk on this vent and open it up and they pull a shotgun.
They were planning to revolt before this happened.
Yeah, that's good.
I like it.
Yeah, we need a bit of headcanon for that.
I know in the rules there's something about how like the occupants of this world have been just storing weapons all over the place, so which I think is sort of a throwaway. I always thought the classes, like traditionally, I was like, boy, as a class system, the soldiers seem really underpowered because it's such a huge trade-off for one extra point of armor or one.
I was about to ask that same thing, like how you guys feel about searching everywhere versus extra point of armor, because I'm the same way. I feel like I'm all in on civilians given the choice until we get like the expansion soldiers, all the gangs and stuff. They get unique starting equipment. They get like class specific additional abilities that kind of make up for it sometimes. But the in the core box, I feel like it's really not worth it. My group is 3 people. We normally each take, when we're playing with 6 and there's 3 soldiers, we each take a soldier and we each take a civilian to make it fair.
So I'd prefer to play with civilians over soldiers because of my play style, but I will say, given the 3 soldiers that you have in the box, obviously your 6 wound guy is there to protect you against abominations, right? And then your other 2 soldiers, if you can give them that armor buff, then they can also survive, or they can at least survive a hit against a tank. Whereas, basically if a civilian is caught, there's nothing saving them. I mean, they're just going to die anyway. So the soldiers are the only ones that actually have a mathematical chance of surviving.
James, you exactly stole my hot take, which is like, I was like, oh, that's a bad trade-off, until I started to play the game and I got the rule right about abominations getting extra activations when you run out of a miniature. And suddenly I realized you always want a soldier with a blade of armor escorting the civilians everywhere, because it's the only way to prevent against that like risk that the game is just going to end because the abomination will lurch 3 zones. And I feel like that's a real cool thematic implication. The idea of like, well, these civilians are really capable. They're going to run around and do stuff really well, but you have to have a soldier with you because it is just too dangerous out there. And anyway, so traditionally I was like, soldiers, I like them visually, but boy, what a trade-off. And now I'm like, that wound can be the difference between just losing the game immediately and winning.
That's making me realize something, because I'm sticking with my take that civilians are better. But we've never had that issue in my group all the time we played Invader, which is the one we played the most, where like a series of extra activations. And I thought we were just cool like that. But now that I think about it, when we're playing Invader, we do tend to split up more. So I think maybe just as part of the strategy of Invader, it's even more important to keep your numbers low, because to prevent big swings like that. Because normally your biggest threat is an extra activation. But now, especially with things like mold spawns and pit spawns in Dark Side, there are just a large number of things can spawn for any reason. There are also extra activations. I feel like they matter a lot less in this game, though, because it's so easy to take down a horde once it's at your feet. But when one shows up right next to you, it's harder because it could be the end of your turn.
Brian, which ones do you prefer?
Yeah. I always thought that like the difference between, it's like, oh, there's classes when you're first reading the rule book, like, oh, there's civilian class and soldier class, okay, and they got the cool little icons on their cards, and it's like, yes, classes. And anyway, yeah, I always thought it was like kind of, it could be stronger, like the difference that could really make them definitive. And usually when I'm like, whenever I'm teaching the rules and explaining to somebody, it's like, is that it? So yeah, I think that the difference could be stronger. I don't have a preference between the two. I like to have a mix of them, you know, knowing that I have somebody that can tank, and knowing that I can have people that can search. So yeah, I don't really have like a strong preference. And then one thing that we were talking about is like, that's really unique to this game is the different damage values. Is this unique to this version, or at least up to this
Green
point?
Horde. Yeah,
Green Horde had that too?
Yeah, your basic orcs do damage 2. And your abominations do damage 3. And your runners are goblins, so they only do damage 1, but they get 2 extra activation. Or
Right.
they get 2 activation.
Yeah, so it's the same here, right? Tanks do 2 damage and abominations do 3 damage, which I completely forgot about. Because I haven't played this for a while, and so like partway through, I was like, oh my gosh, I probably cheated a couple of tank hits that I didn't deal 2 damage to my people. Whoops.
Yeah, gonna be honest, I forgot that wasn't the case when we did first edition. I'm just realizing now. So
yeah,
because that's the standard from here on out.
And then the last,
and somehow I think this is the last mechanic we haven't talked about, at least in depth. I mentioned it a little bit earlier, and it's probably one of the first ones new players will notice. You start with some extra friendly miniatures on the board. You have the sentry gun and you have the bot. Both of them are, you can find codes with them, or you can start with remote control of them. In every mission, I believe. I don't think any of them skip either. One of the objectives will secretly be the codes for one and one for the other, for the bot and the sentry gun.
Yeah.
They have stats. The sentry gun you can use while you're right next to it to fire, but it can't move. I don't think you can move it for a lot of actions yet. I think that's a thing later in like Undead or Alive, where the big gun you could move for a bunch of actions. Green Horde had a thing like that too.
The trebuchet and the ballista.
Yeah, but I don't think this one you can. I don't think it.
No, in Invader, the turret is like mounted in the ground. It can't be moved.
And the bot, you can't fire without the codes, but you can have it follow you if you're in the same zone. So both of them can be used. I think that's true.
They can follow you if you are a controller. So you either have to control them, or the remote control.
Yeah. The machines is one of my favorite things about this game. It's so cool. It adds a little bit of like a tower defense feel to it sometimes, depending on the situation. Sometimes you just can't ever use the sentry gun because
there are some missions where especially the turret feels pretty superfluous.
Yeah, but I love that you can jump on, like you could jump on the gun and mount it and fire away, and then someone could get severely overpowered very quickly, which could be fun shenanigans. In addition to like the remote control that you could do. I just love that element of it. You know, the bot is really helpful early game when you're still you don't have great gear, and it can kind of help tank or defend your team, and even take down abominations.
Because one of our core survivors starts with Mitski, I think. Yeah. Starts with remote control bot. And you really have to be careful about XP gain with her. I don't think it's AP yet. Because like left unchecked, everybody else is running around with SMGs, and she has the bot, and it can be in a completely different location. For the record, the bot can be destroyed, but the mechanics are kind of weird about how it's destroyed. The Xenos will completely ignore it if it hasn't activated that turn, but if it has, they'll treat it like a player and kill it in one hit.
I love that part of it. Like, it's so smart. It's so much better than if they were just like one or the other all the time. Like, you know, always having to make the decision and trade-offs of when do we activate them, when don't we?
It looks a little complicated when you're reading it in the rules, but it's pretty intuitive.
I love the robot. I have experienced the thing where in some missions in the past, my entire team just sits in one room passing the robot control around, because once you're at yellow, you can just pass it and then take 3 actions. And the ability to do the whole mission, like just mow through hordes of Xenos using one robot, was, to me, like, this is effective, but it's not the story I want my game to tell. I don't want all my survivors to be sitting in a room passing a controller around. So I had to kind of like house rule that one person can activate the machine each round, even though sometimes I break that.
And that's something about the kind of the sci-fi setting as a whole, is that now everybody's always loves like new abominations and expansions and stuff. But now there's also really often new sentry guns and sentry turrets and new robots. What are the robots? Are they just called bots?
Bots, yeah.
The bots,
including some very interesting references in the Kickstarter that we'll get to next episode. But that's just, they're so mix and matchable, and a lot of them have very like unique mechanics. I like the meteor sentry gun. I won't go too much into it. It's not for this episode. But it's just, it's very interesting additional mechanics. That's another one that has never come back. A lot of these have in some form.
I guess bots are my favorite part of this game. The sentry gun
kind of is in Undead or Alive.
James, you were saying?
I was just saying that the bots are my favorite part of this version of Zombicide. It definitely is my favorite thing to do. Mitsuki is my favorite character to play. Anytime I can get a hold of the bot, then I'll even take a wound from, a zombie if I can and not lose the robot, if I can do it, just because, I love my robot. It's my robot.
It's like little Mitsuki, she's diving in front of the bot. Like, no.
Right. Don't hurt my robot.
It's interesting that you say it's your favorite mechanic. If I had to pick a single difference that was my favorite, I'd probably have to say concentrated fire, just because of how much of the games feel it's responsible for. It changes the equipment deck. It makes the abomination have to be so much more. But the bots are definitely a very cool addition.
It's so fun to have Mitsuki moving from zone to zone and having this giant robot just follow behind her.
Yep.
Like, the theme of that is just wonderful for me.
Honestly, I think the most important change in this version of Zombicide from any previous one is this is the first version where now if you lose a survivor, you lose the mission.
Oh.
And that definitely changes how you play the game. There's no more heroic sacrifices. You actually have to pay attention if you're taking wounds. And I think that changes this game more than any of the other mechanics we've talked about before.
Yeah, good call. That is important. And I don't know, like, was Simon getting a lot of people still complaining that this was like a player elimination or survivor elimination game up to this point? Does anybody remember like the time? I wasn't
really a part of the community.
I remember a lot of like, YouTube videos I would watch for reviews of things. I'd be like, yeah, this is my least favorite thing. So that's my assumption. They maybe did it for that reason or started for that reason or needed it in the end for balance. I don't know. Can only speculate. Okay, let's talk about components of the game. What really stands out to you, Schmedley?
So, we've covered a lot. I think the first thing a lot of people will notice is the extra miniatures of the survivors, because it comes with the sentry gun and the turret. There's not just the 6 friendly minis. Beyond that, we talked about how differently set up the tiles are, all the cards and stuff. Components wise, I don't think there's a whole lot different. I think we've pretty much settled on the standard components you find in a Zombicide game at this point. Because we're still with the colored base rings, we're still with the dashboards. They are more thematic. They're kind of a little more sci-fi'd up, the pegs for the dashboard this time. But other than that, I think it's pretty much the same stuff you'd expect to find in Green Horde or anything past first edition.
Yeah, I would say that if you're used to the quality level of any other Zombicide game, this one won't disappoint. All the tokens and everything are what you'd come to expect. The dashboards, it's really cool that you can hold 11 pieces of equipment, basically 11 cards. I only have one complaint about the dashboard, and that's basically its height. So they changed the dimensions on the dashboard from the previous versions of the game. And what it does is it basically makes it almost impossible to have a 2x3 board and then both you and your friends sit around with your dashboards on the same table on a standard 36-inch or whatever they are, 32, 34-inch card table. I know it's a small nitpick, but you either have to have the dashboards off to the side somewhere else or a TV tray or something. They're just a little bit too big for everything to fit onto the table.
The only other component thing that jumps out to me is like the mold zones. There's no component like that in Black Plague or Green Horde. These thin, glossy cardboard zones that change the field. I know there's going to be corruption in White Death. In any of the other Zombicides, is there like a big zone changing terrain that comes into play during the game?
Yeah, Toxic City Mall has rubble.
Okay.
So basically there's small rubble, which is kind of like the mold, and then there's large rubble, kind of self-explanatory. And I would nitpick the mold is they're too big. They don't need to be as big as they are. They could be small because half the time they hang off the board. They could be 33% smaller and still do what they need to do.
I mean, really, they could probably be as small as the pits, which only cover maybe a third of the tiles. That way you could still see the tile borders.
Yeah, that's a good point.
But maybe they just do it so that it'll for sure cover the doors to help kind of remind you that the doors are gone now, or where the doorways were and all that.
Do that.
Yeah,
and I do like the overlappiness creates to me this thematic idea of these halls are completely covered in the kind of resin that you see in the Alien movies.
Yeah,
it is supposed to be a continuous trail too.
Yep.
Yeah.
We forgot to mention. I forgot to mention when talking about all the unique mechanics of the spoiler abomination, because he's a very detailed guy. If his mold trail ever connects to or any mold, most of it comes from him, but most missions start with a little mold on the spawn zones. Connects to spawn zones. If you ever have a trail from one to another, you just lose. That's an extra loss con in this game, and that's another reason that the spoiler abomination needs to show up multiple times, because he's never going to be heading for a second spawn zone.
I love an extra losing condition in any game. it's always
a very interesting one
fun.
Because you don't notice it's about to happen until you're 2 turns away from it happening.
Right. Yeah.
And you're like, oh no, we shouldn't have stood here. He's going to walk by that zone and we're just going to lose.
But yeah, I think the miniature quality is just amazing in this game. I feel like the sculpts and or the plastic that they're using is just even better than the last time, than Green Horde was, which is the one before this. And yeah, it's just fantastic. And these guys were so fun to paint, these millions of workers, hunters, tanks. I
do love
spoiler abominations are so great, and all the wiggly bits that coming off of them, they're very dynamic.
They do a great job at it being a very horrifying alien threat that you're fighting.
Yeah, there's Tyranids in Warhammer, and everybody's like, oh, they're just colored aliens, kind of, and I like that they put in the effort to make these guys unique. It definitely has their own vibe. Part alien, part Cthulhu, part what is this? And it's so cool because if you look closely at the artwork or the miniatures as you're painting them, you could see that there's an evolution going on. There are components, there's kind of the skull top to the workers that on the tanks is splitting open, and more tentacles and stuff are coming out of the front of it. And you're oh, it's the same thing. It's just evolved and bulked up because it's mutated more, and more stuff coming off of him. And then the spoiler abomination, even more, even though there are kind of different things about it. But I really loved
talking about another
design.
Thematic. Just the idea of them, of the mold spawn, just suddenly all these guys will just grow out of mold on the floor, because it's not it doesn't pass by and lay eggs. There's some goop, and that goop turns into guys. That's a very horrifying kind of alien picture. It.
I was talking to my buddy Jay about this, and he was like, oh yeah, that's That's like Blight in StarCraft. Is there any StarCraft? Any guys play StarCraft?
Yeah. Yep.
And I was like, I don't know. I never got around to playing it.
Oh, okay.
It's just a feature of the Zerg faction is that whenever they build a base, it covers the ground in a purple goo, and that purple goo extends certain benefits with certain units. They can burrow in it, they can do various things, but it's also just like a big mark that this is an organic threat, right? And I think that the mold has that same sort of thing that like it makes me also think of like, if you remember Aliens, I've been thinking so much about Aliens this week.
Of course.
Like when the Marines go in there, one of them shines his light on the creepy, weird resinous wall and then turns around, and the alien literally like turns around. It was sitting there. He shined his flashlight on it. Couldn't tell it was there. And that's the feeling I get from the mold spawns is like, no, they're already there. They were always there. They're just waiting.
Yeah. And I love that they're double-sided, so you can flip over the mold into the burnt inactive side. So you can use your flamethrower with the Hellfire and not only take out all the enemies there, but all the actors there, but you can also deactivate that mold spawn area. So that's cool. And then, so obviously nothing can spawn up from that mold. And it probably doesn't count for the connecting. Actually,
it breaks the chain.
Yeah, breaks the chain.
Yeah, it's weird that it has the underside. It's so you know that the room still isn't a security room, but it is interesting that it's very niche that you need that flip side at all.
Yeah, it barely comes up, but it's cool that it's there. The art and the graphic design of this game is great. I mean, the sci-fi vibe, like they are on point. You know, they don't have to go so far with the themes here, but they do, and I love it. Like they change the logo, they change all of the graphics, and everywhere. You know, you're totally immersed in the sci-fi theme, and I really love.
I think it's interesting theme-wise. Sorry to cut you off. I think I said this before we started recording. It's interesting that they went so hard in such a specific sci-fi direction, because I feel like in fantasy, it's more of a kind of kitchen sink, generic Tolkien style fantasy, which is what people think of when they think of fantasy. But in sci-fi, I feel like a more generic sci-fi would be like a kind of more spacefaring Star Trek-y. So it's interesting that you go so hard in this like Doom, Warhammer direction. It's more dystopian, I guess, but it's I think of all the setting, it really wears inspiration on its sleeve a lot more, in more than just the Survivor designs.
Yeah, and it's interesting, like the art style, the art direction for the art itself is so different than all of the other Zombicides. It's like a much more, I don't know, like, is it a much more mature look and feel than all the others? Kind of have like a comic book vibe. Not that any of those are appropriate or inappropriate. It's just interesting how much that deviates from the others.
I took a look. I was thinking about this. I took a look through all the Zombicides. So you've got the sort of French. I don't want to mispronounce his name, but Guiton style.
Guiteau, I
modern.
think.
What?
I had to learn that for I think the first episode. I butchered it horribly, and people made fun of me. It's Guiteau.
Guiteau. Well, that sort of French style. It's modern. It's medieval, and it's undead or alive. For Army of the Dead, Marvel Zombies, and Deceased, it's not that style. It's close, but it's shifted to a much more comic book illustrative style. Night of the Living Dead is a one-off, and it's sort of a retro poster style. It's very realistic.
It does have a style like that, yeah.
But I don't know if it was just that Simon was on an Adrian Smith tear. Like, this is coming off of like Rising Sun, then he did Hate, and now he's doing his own Zombicide, and it might have been Simon was like, Adrian Smith prints money, let's just put him on everything. Mm-hmm. But I think it was such a smart choice for this, because with zombies, they're already so grotesque and macabre. I feel like that French cartoon style gives us a little distance from it and makes it a game. But with this, these are made up Cthulhu aliens, and I think the realism actually grounds them as something that is creepy, and it establishes the theme. Where if they were cartoonish, I think it would erode sort of like the atmosphere of the game.
Yeah, I think I agree with you. And the thing I like about this is that they didn't just go for the obvious low-hanging fruit of let's make this look Geiger-esque, right? Or let's make this look like some version of Tyranids, as Ron's brought up, they clearly have taken their inspiration for the power armor from 40K, but the alien designs for this game are not. And I think that they had a big challenge of how can we make our own aliens, and not make it look just like something that you've seen before in another movie, like the bug thing. As much as I'd love to see Starship Troopers, I don't get insect vibes from these aliens. I don't get that they look like they're humans that have become something else. They look completely, different in their own thing, which I appreciate.
Not from the spoilers or the standards, I guess. They're not actually called spoilers. But yeah, the drillers do look more like bugs when we get to Dark Side.
Crabs.
But yeah, you're right. They're very weird, kind of, and it's hard to make like a whole unique alien. It's not easy because there's been so many. The design space for biological looking aliens is pretty tapped out, but they did a pretty good job. It is weird. It's funny that they did seemingly try pretty hard to distinguish them from Tyranids from Warhammer, and then called them Xenos. But
so James, being an old school Warhammer gamer, in your day, you did play Warhammer 40K, right?
Oh yeah,
not just fantasy. Okay, so how do you feel about this very heavily inspired armor? I don't even know what it's called. I think you just said it, but I forgot already.
Power armor.
Power armor.
Is it power armor? Do we get a name for it?
So power armor, is obviously cool looking. Games Workshop's been milking that cow for decades, making millions and upon millions of dollars on the backs of Space Marines, right? So why not do something like that? I've got a friend. How I got him into playing Zombicide was he was a 40K player, and I'm like, hey, look, you can play your Space Marine in this game. He's like, oh, okay, cool, right? So whatever gets him in the door. So no, I like it. I like that they went with the whole nationality theme too. I think that's fun. Yes. The Norwegian, the American, and I think the woman's a Jamaican, I believe. But also I like the little touches that they put in the tiles as well. Like there's a room where there's a Norwegian flag. So I kind of like picture
Agnes's room. I think it's
like that's his right. Yeah, that's his room, right? So that's where he hangs out. I like that whole bit, and then they also sprinkled in, as Guillotine Games is always going to do. They sprinkle in some generic ode to other characters, like you've got a clear Ripley knockoff, and you got your swashbuckling rogue guy, whether you want him to be Solo or Malcolm Reynolds or whatever.
Yeah.
He's kind of a vibes. Trope. So yeah. So I think those are fun. Nate, how do you like the core characters?
I actually really like you called the nationalities out, and it made me think of another thing, because 40K is so cool visually, but all of the guys, or most of them, are wearing helmets that conceal their identity, because there's this sense of like the terrifying military uniformity of it all. And I really like in this game that almost all of the soldiers have exposed faces, because it gives them character, it gives them individuality. I love Baraka has she has this like headdress little thing. I tried to look up comparisons. The only thing I could find is it looks a little bit like some Indian jewelry I've seen, but like just little details that be like, yeah, we're all wearing power armor, but we're also all different people inside this power armor, which is much more what you want in the kind of like aliens horror movie, where it's a bunch of different people stuck together. That's always what drives like horror and zombie movies. It's not the zombies, it's the people who are stuck together. And if they're all totally uniform, you've never seen a zombie movie where the like soldiers who are all wearing camo are the good guys, right? They're always the guys that you're like, I'm worried about those guys.
Right.
So
and that brings up another one. A lot of the missions, tying back to like the thematic appropriateness, a lot of the missions in this are about evacuating people from this apocalypse. They're like the ship is showing up, we have to go find that we have a life sign reading right here, we think there's a survivor in this building, or you have to stall the Xenos while people evacuate in one of the missions. And that's a very interesting way to tie it into you being soldiers. You're not people who are surviving an ongoing apocalypse. You're a military force that's reacting to a starting apocalypse. But as far as
go ahead. Sorry.
As far as the survivors go, I think, as much as I like Invader, I think the starting survivors, skill-wise, mechanically, are a little weak. There's some very cool ones. I like Mitsuki. Magnus is pretty good. 6 armor is good. I think Taunt, one of the worst abilities in the game. I don't want to see Taunt at blue on a character in the core box.
It's very situational.
I don't want to see Taunt on a character.
I mean,
Yeah.
it's very situational. When it does work, it's pretty friggin' cool. It's like, let's set a trap. But it's like
That's
maybe
true.
once every other game that it really comes in.
I don't want to play a game where a character might as well not have a blue ability.
Yeah.
I don't think
Shove,
that should
though.
happen a single mission.
So Jared with Shove is like the most broken blue core game ability I think that we have up to this point, at least. Shove is so strong, right? Where you can just push every Xeno in a zone to another zone.
Shove is very good. I'm a big fan of action economy abilities of blue. I love +1 search. There's no +1 move in the core.
Yeah.
But +1 move is also very good.
So do we all
really just Taunt? It feels like whoever draws the short straw gets Taunt in these 6.
Yeah, I couldn't disagree with you more. Taunt is just the opposite of Shove. I mean, you said action economy. Now I don't have to move to you. I bring you to me.
Good point.
And there's also so many times too when I'm just an action too short to feel good about going to kill some hunters. You know what? They're 2 zones away from me. I'm going to taunt them. Now they're in my zone. Now I'm chopping them up with my hand weapons. And in combination with Jared, you get those guys rolling together. I taunt them in, finish them off. What you can't finish, we'll shove them away. It's no big deal. And you give a Vivian, 2 heavy cutters. There's no reason to have even pull abominations on the board anymore. I mean, it's all over at that point. It's just she's one of the most powerful characters in the game.
All right, James, you're at a different level, man. You're like up here.
I think none of those situations you listed feel like they come up very often where you're the exact right amount of spaces away and can't move there.
I think they could. It sounds like it makes sense.
The way you're describing it, I could reconsider. Maybe in this game exactly. I feel like across the franchise, Taunt is on the weaker side. Taunt-like abilities.
I side more with James on this, but I will say, thinking about Taunt, I feel like one of the coolest impacts of this is because she is a Ripley stand-in, and Ripley has possibly the most famous taunt in all of science fiction, right?
Yeah.
Like, so you cannot take this character and use taunt without thinking she's like screaming, "Get away from her, you!" And you get the rest. We'll keep the podcast clean, but like the fact that they built that in at Blue. Schmedley, I think when I first started this, I'm like, why would I want to draw a zombie horde towards this civilian scientist with no cool abilities? But yeah, once you get some heavy cutters, or even like there's a dozen good uses for this ability, and it is free.
Yeah. I wasn't considering character combinations. That's fair. But like I said, my group tends to split up a lot more in Invader. But yeah, I can see it. I don't think I've ever been able to dual wield heavy cutters, but if that comes up a lot for you, that's great. I imagine it's awesome. I don't think I've ever had 2 heavy cutters.
It's like James talked about, like, why do we even have abominations anymore? Because I ran the numbers. If you have 2 heavy cutters on a single hit, 90% chance you're going to hit 3 damage if you do a concentrated attack. And heavy cutters, real easy to slap an energy cell into. Now you're at 95%. If you're Baraka with an energy cell, it is 99 or 98%. Like
Lucky is pretty good. I think that's the only ability we haven't talked about. Lucky, again, I feel like probably one of the best abilities in the game.
You just get to reroll, right?
Yep.
Just the ability to have a second reroll when you get one of the many have a reroll cards is so good.
It is. It's like, I'll give you a light machine gun, no problem.
Or a chainsaw.
Yeah. You guys have any other? We talked about heavy cutters. What other equipment cards? Any stand out? Personally, I really like the minigun and the pyro minigun. I
think those are dark side, so I wasn't.
Yeah, those aren't in this set.
I thought those aren't in this set. Oh,
No, that's Black Ops, I think.
You've
Black
got
Ops. I thought the pyre minigun was gone, but I thought the minigun was in this one.
Oh,
All right, I'm out then.
so like this
Who
one.
else?
Melee, you've got cattle prod, which is bad. You've got sledge, which I thought was bad, but is really good actually.
Sledge is
really
really
good.
You've got
Yeah.
chainsaw, which is really good, and you've got heavy cutter, which is really good, and you've got dual heavy cutters, which is the best combination of the game. So
Yeah.
like, it's sledge is 3 dice, hits on 3, does 1 damage, which is great for clearing out a bunch of workers, but also is pretty decent in a pinch if you just need to try to bonk an abomination on the head. It might take you a couple swings, but you've got okay odds. And then chainsaw and heavy cutter are just abomination killers.
I will say, I think on multiple occasions, when I find an energy cell, I'll opt to put it in a sledge over a prototype weapon sitting in my backpack. The sledge is really good compared to if you're doing a mission without a lot of outside combat. The prototype weapons not that good of an investment when you could be re-rolling your sledge or your heavy cutter. So yeah, melee definitely huge in this game. Some games struggle to have melee have a place, but the melee weapons rock in this one.
Yeah, I think it's even more important than shooting. You know, if you've got even a heavy cutter or a chainsaw on somebody with lucky, or you've got the power cell, then the first thing you should be doing if there's a potential of going outside is drawing that abomination outside. Dance with him. You can't create mold outside and then kill him. It's the way you deal with it. You don't want to just stay inside with, abominations spreading mold everywhere. And taunt, allows you to, get him moving, shove, can get him out of the airlock. So, it's like I said, it's what you should be doing.
Wow.
And that ties into the fact that none of the ranged weapons have a 0 range. That
there's no 0 range.
There's a sharp divide between melee, and I think they knew the game had to have strong melee options, because this happened to me in scenarios where you get trapped outside because you step outside, Xenos go into the far airlock. You're like, I've got range weapons. If I step in there, I won't be able to attack them at range 0 and I'll die. I guess I'll just stay out here, and then you get trapped out there and there's nothing you can do because your bullet guns don't work.
They're so dedicated to the divide that some of the bots, I don't remember if it's the default one or not, they all have a ranged and a melee attack, and some of them have the exact same stats with the exception that one is 1 to 2 and one is 0 range.
Yep.
So none of the characters in the box either have point blank. So you can't turn any of your 1-to-1 or 1-to-3 guns into 0 range guns. Whereas if you had point blank, but if you want that, then stick around and play until the ultra red mode. But that takes a long time.
Yeah, it's interesting. The no ranged weapons have 0. It's hard to get used to at first, getting back into this or getting into this after playing any other version of Zombicide. So that's really interesting. I wanted to call out this weapon, the flamethrower. So rather than a Molotov or a, what's it called in fantasy again?
Dragon's Fire.
My headcanon for it is that it's not that the environment outside is airless. It's that it's actually super high pressure, almost like water, and water deflects bullets. So the turret and the turret and these energy weapons and all these things, they fire effectively in this high pressure system. But if you try to shoot a machine gun basically underwater, it's just not going to do anything. The bullets are just going to spray off course. So that's my headcanon is it's a high pressure environment outside the airlock.
Love that.
It works.
Yeah. All right. Oh, do we all agree that Mitsuki is the best survivor here?
I do.
Is that everybody's favorite? It's my favorite too.
Yeah, the bot control is very good.
Bot control is
it's
just
dangerous if you don't pay attention to it, because I think this is a common tip I give out. It's important to try and equally split XP at least early on.
Yeah.
I've always loved Cole with his free search action, but in the last week I've lost 2 games because Cole was like, "Oh, I got a search action, I'll use it for free," and triggered a mold scon that killed somebody. And now I'm like, Cole, will you just leave well enough alone?
Yeah.
Get it? You have action economy. Stop searching for stuff.
I'm suddenly unable to picture the cards. Are we at the era yet where there's 1 type per spawn card?
Yeah.
Yes.
Yep.
Okay.
Yeah, this established that having 1 type per card, and I like the presentation of it because you just got one big artwork of like one, you know, enemy type, and then it just clearly, oh, that's like a
So
bad
they
example.
really got the flex.
Of course, I always get a mold spawn. So you like one big art of a dude, and then his red, orange, yellow, blue spawning, which I love.
Yeah.
Like I love that clarity there. It's just so much faster and easier to read and whatnot. I love that.
I prefer that as well.
I think I prefer it. There is something to be lost with the inability to control the ratio of units per adrenaline level. That first edition I think did really nicely, but I do think for ease of play, for quickly getting through the zombie phase, it's really nice.
And this isn't the enemy spawn deck, but the equipment deck. Just real quick, the equipment deck has 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7. Thank you. Yeah, 7 friggin' enemy mold spawn cards. It's brutal. When those
And very
keep coming
importantly,
up.
like those replace the search cards. Just the ones which always place a walker. But these ones can be hunters or tanks. Like mold spawn can be anything but an abomination.
That's dangerous.
It is.
Whenever I draw one of these in early game, I'm like, thank goodness I drew it right now.
Yeah.
Because when you draw it and it only spawns 4 or 5 hunters, you're like, oh, this is good. This is the best case scenario that I searched for something and now there's 5 monsters on the board.
Yeah, and you get like 2 hunters per mold, and there's 10 mold on the board.
Yeah, I just love that extra variety that this game provides. Like for, you know, instead of just spawning and extra activations, now you have the mold spawn. It's really great.
Yeah, I like that too.
Let's see. I don't like how many spoiler abomination cards are in this deck. I do. I just, it's stressful.
12 abominations in a deck is a lot. I mean, it's more than we've seen in a standard deck. I mean, usually your standard deck is 8 abominations, and you're not always guaranteed to get them because of the hopscotch nature of the cards. Whereas this one, if you pull a card with an abomination on it, you're getting an abomination. There's no ifs, ands, or buts. Same thing with the tanks, and the hunters.
But you know, like I skipped all the fantasy stuff. I went straight from Zombicide First Edition, aka Classic, to Zombicide Invader. And I was like, oh my god, this is so much better. Like in terms of what I liked, which was like the less, like you don't have that slow burn. You don't have Alien 1, for forever, like for a while. It's like you're right in the action. You're hitting it. You've got bigger, badder weapons. You got bigger, badder bad guys that are coming up more often. You got concentrated attack. So like, I love the more kind of run and gun style, and you feel like a total badass when you're firing these things.
Because this happens to my group every time we play, where there's like a point in the middle of the mission, and this might take some spawn deck modification. We'll talk about it later. But ideally, there's always a point in the middle of the mission where you think there's like no way out, and then you win still. And it's a very, I think a lot of the mechanics where they show up in much bigger hordes, but those hordes are also a lot easier to deal with. It's kind of like the Zombicide idea to the extreme, is a big contributor to that, because you just look at a whole bunch of miniatures and you're like, I don't know how we deal with that. And then you roll a whole bunch of dice and you deal with it. It's a great feeling.
Yeah, that's your classic Zombicide play, isn't it? Like that whole thing.
It's awesome.
Yeah.
And,
for this game, like the sort of
another thing with the spawn cards, go ahead, is that when you draw an abomination, and there are a lot of them, all abominations on the board, in this case just the spoiler, get an extra activation, even if you don't have, even if you're not spawning one, and more importantly, even if you are. So if you have an extra spoiler, which you won't with just the base game, not only does the second one spawn, but the first one moves. They're 2 steps closer to connecting their mold trails, and twice as hard to stop from doing that. It's like it's a big deal, especially when you start adding in the extra abominations, which does take away from the spoiler. But now if there's 2 abominations and they both extra activate in addition to a third one showing up, that's a whole problem in and of itself.
All right, we got a book club mission here.
Yeah, mission 8.
Let me bring this up. Mission 8, Code Orange, medium, 6+ survivors, and 90 minutes. We're almost ready for payback. We just need some practice and better weapons. The complex holds secured doors for Code Orange, the name used for restricted material. We may find there what we need to kick some Xeno's butt. So it is a 9-mission square shaped board. A 9-tile square shaped board. And it's got 3 spawn zones. Of course, your sentry gun and your bot, 5 objectives. And let's see, it starts with 4 mold, 1 on each of the 3 spawn zones and 1 just in another corner. And then there's a unique thing where there's an exit token on an airlock. It's not an exit token, actually. It's just used to denote that you need to get a bot to that airlock to be able to open it special. So if your bot dies before you can do that, then you lose the mission, because objectives are to take all objectives and reach the orange level or more with all survivors.
How are you feeling about that second objective, Ryan?
Yet again, another grindy mission. No, but Schmedley didn't pick it this time, so I can't pick on Schmedley for picking it, because we all picked it together this time. I only wish that the bot was not so close. Just one zone away from that objective.
Definitely handle that first round.
Yeah.
It's basically, it's a 2-action penalty.
It'd be way cooler if it was somewhere else, or if it was randomized in some way. That'd be neat too, for replayability. All right, Schmedley, how'd this mission go for you?
It went pretty standard. We got some really good gear early on, so some of it was pretty easy later on. We didn't get super close to mold being a problem, because the spoiler abomination kept showing up from the same spawn point at that top one. We had, I think, Magnus was basically just kept killing it, trying to get to orange, while everybody else went out and did other stuff. We did suffer from something that I noticed. I feel like a lot of Invader specific missions have, which is that range, I feel like, barely matters. Because you stay with the limited indoor range outside of hallways that a lot of zombicides have. And there's that one hallway that isn't really anywhere in the corner there. And there's outside where most of the guns you can't use. And there's not I think the zombies never really even made it outside. And all the time spent outside is so short because all the doors are so close to each other. So I feel like this is a mission where, like, just the range on your gun, if you get the sniper rifle, is just one of the worst guns you can have in this mission. And that's unfortunate. I realized that was kind of a downer. We had a lot of fun. That's a point I feel like some Invader missions have.
So all my Zombicide friends don't like Invader. So I couldn't get any of them together to play this one, so I had to do this one solo. So I had 2 choices. I could tell them all that they're out of the will and I hate them and I never want to see them again, and take my toys home.
Friends. Could you give me their names and addresses?
Yeah, so I could have done that, but I chose to use this as an opportunity. I don't often play games solo, and I've played through all these missions 3 times before with groups. And so I kind of had an idea of what I wanted to do. And all of them have negative opinions on this game, but I didn't have as many negative opinions as they did. So I took the opportunity to go through and play all 11 missions by myself, just to see what was going on.
Just real quick.
Yeah. So I found it interesting because I did keep track of the turns of all the games that I played. And the 4 easy missions, they averaged 7.5 turns to complete. The 3 medium missions took me 10.3 turns to complete. And then the 4 hard took me 8.75 turns to complete. This specific mission, though, being a medium, took me longer than any other mission. It took me 16 turns. And it's only one of 4 missions where I went orange, but keep in mind that was one of the victory conditions. And I really like it. I think it's the hardest mission in the book.
Yeah.
I honestly, I had a good time. I took 3 wounds, all to Magnus, and not to an abomination, but to 3 hunters that extra activated in his zone, which just rarely happens because you don't see hunters come up that often in this game. It seems like for me, it's mostly, I'm sorry, did I say hunters? I meant workers. It seems like most of the time you're seeing tanks and hunters and abominations. it doesn't actually seem like you get to see many workers often in the game. So by the end of the game, I had 17 mold zones on the board.
Oof.
Yeah. No. So my last turn on turn 16 or turn 15, just preemptively, I had a character who had 2 canisters, and so he basically torched 2 mold zones just to make sure that nothing happened on that in spawn zone, something crazy that would have the mold connect. And then on turn 16, my favorite Mitsuki took the last objective, and she was the only character that wasn't orange at the time. So she went orange with the objective, and I won the game. So yeah, I had a good time still with the mission, and I don't feel like I wasted my time replaying those missions again. I felt like it kind of gave me an appreciation on some different tactics to use, and some different things to look for, and what is, what's dangerous and what's not. One of the things I don't know that we brought up in the rules changes from previous versions is this is the second thing that I think Simon did listening to fans, and that's how they changed the rules for extra activations if you run out of miniatures. This game is unique. No other version of Zombicide has it like this up to this point. It's very different, and that's one of the big reasons why my friends don't like this game is they think it makes it too easy. When you only have 1 box worth of zombies, running out of our Xenos, running out of them should be a lot easier. Therefore, it's a lot more dangerous. We're used to playing fantasy and modern where it's almost mathematically impossible for us to run out just because of how many miniatures we actually own. Whereas this game, in the core box is what you've got. And so I do run out of miniatures a lot, especially if you go past, 7 or 8 turns, you're going to run out of miniatures at some point. And but they neuter that. And if there's not an abomination already on the board, it's really not that dangerous to have him on the board. A lot of these missions are only 3 spawn zones, so he's only going to move twice. It's not like, if you can stay away from it, it's not going to really kill you. And so I really think it neutered this game along with the concentrated fire. And I mean, those are the 2 main reasons why I have a hard time finding people that want to play this game.
I do think, like I've mentioned a few times now, there is some adjustments needed. I tend to change the spawn deck in all of my Zombicides, but Invader especially, and it sounded like Nate had a pretty similar idea. We can get more into that after we talk about how your mission went, Nate, because you did this one too, right?
I'll just add, James made me happy. He said, just to be sure. And that definitely reminded me of Aliens. Like, I say we take off, nuke the site from orbit. Only way to be sure. Yep. Thank you for bringing that moment back to me. So I played this 3 times. The first time I played with the easy deck. I wanted to experience, we haven't talked about it yet, but Zombicide Invader comes with a spawn deck. And in the back of the book, it says, if you want to make this harder, remove cards 1 through 25.
Yeah.
And basically, there are 2 identical sets of 25 cards, only the second 25 spawn in greater numbers. So to make the game harder, you just take out that 1 through 25. First one, I did easy, and I was like, I'm going to rush. For those of you just listening who can't see the screen, to me, the biggest feature of this map is there is in the bottom left-hand corner a long hallway with a spawn zone at the end of it. Mm-hmm. If a spoiler abomination spawns there, which they always did for me, there's nothing to stop them from walking down this hallway and creating a super spawn zone. Just a nightmare that will spill Xenos out onto the where they'll spread across the rest of the map. First time I was like, I'm going to rush that zone. I'm going to get in there before anything happens. I rushed into the zone and got killed by an abomination. Second time through, I was like, I'm going to take a more conservative approach. I'm going to go to the place that's furthest from all the spawn zones, pretty much the dead center, and I'm going to huddle and search for a bit. And I did that for a bit. I got geared up, and then we spread out and we did all the things. And the last thing was, by the time, I think it was like, James, you said, what did you say, turn 16 you were at?
Yeah.
I think I was close to that.
Mm-hmm.
Oh, go ahead.
Oh, I was just going to say turn 15 is when I nuked the site from orbit. Turn 16 is when I won.
I love it. All right. So, yeah, I'm at turn 15 or 16, which for me means there are no more Xenos in the supply. And that also means approaching, which I've left off this long hallway of horror till the last. It means I have to approach this really carefully because not only is it filled with Xenos, but any of those first 2 spaces by the spawn zone are almost certainly going to be a place as an abomination will come and kill. And so I had to really think tactically about how to get there. I decided to actually use Mitsuki, who has a sprint ability, to like clear the zone and then get her in there and leave enough noise to lure the abomination. It was a really cool sort of tactical challenge. And then I did it once more with the hard deck. This was a lot like the quote unquote easy deck or the standard deck. And I regret to say I did sort of what I would consider kind of a degenerate play pattern, which is I found the Spotlight. It's the card that lets you search for 2 cards. And I just sat in the middle, passing it around so everyone could search for 2. And we like burned through most of the spawn deck in the first couple turns. And I was like, I'm going to feel terrible sharing this later because I hate this play pattern. I feel like it's rewarding, but I don't like the story it tells. It feels weird. But the rest of the story it told was great because we went to turn 17. There were zombies everywhere. There were moments I wasn't sure anyone was going to make it through. Like it was pretty fun. And we, once again, the end of it was blasting our way through this long hallway and hoping that we can get there without an abomination suddenly spawning, triggering 2 or 3 times and killing us.
You did make me remember kind of a defining moment from our playthrough is that we got speaking of that lower left building, we got the other 4 objectives pretty fast, and we kind of had to regroup and like mount an assault on the last building because so many guys had built up there just so we could squeeze one guy in to get to around the corner there, because it's very heavily guarded because it's a tight corner right next to that spawn zone. I also think it doesn't happen very often. You start next to a spawn zone, and I can't think of another mission in the franchise where that happens. It doesn't really matter because you get to move a lot before stuff starts spawning, but it's interesting that they can walk right into you because the mold destroys that wall.
I would say there's also a real fun element to this map, which is in the bottom right-hand corner, there is an objective token right by an airlock. And you could gear up and march down this long internal hallway past the spawn zone and fight your way through it. Or you could just send one survivor out with an oxygen tank and sort of run alone, jump in, get that and get out, while the rest of them make enough noise to draw all the zombies away. And that seems to me to be an obvious choice. You don't have to be a genius to figure it out, but it's a really fun thing to send a survivor out there. That, imagine them out there just breathing through an oxygen mask. It makes me think of, you've seen the movie Abyss, right?
Yeah.
Oh yeah.
There's a scene in that movie where Ed Harris has to swim by himself in frigid water between 2 airlocks underwater, and that sense of like isolation and danger. I mean, not to overstate the point, but I think that's a real cool feature, is that one person is just going to undertake this pretty scary mission all by themselves because it's reasonably safe and it's a desperate situation.
Yeah.
Is noise tracked normally outside? It is, right?
Yes, but it's, I guess, yeah, you could just make noise normally.
Well, then that confirms that it's not airless.
Yeah.
There you go. Your theory's right.
And yeah, and in fact, in water-like conditions, sound carries even better.
Ryan, how did your mission go?
Yeah. Okay, guys. I was about to come on this show and be like, you know what? Everybody who thinks that this game is not hard is insane because this game is terrifying. That's because I played my own version of Nightmare Mode that I learned off mic just before we started recording from these guys. It's in rules you might have missed. Actually, we've already talked about it. Rules I missed. I'm curious if anybody else missed it, which is, you don't extra activate Xenos, the regular horde enemies, on running out of those miniatures. You just give the spoiler abomination an extra activation. So I played this on Ultra Nightmare Mode, and you know what? It was damn fun. And if anybody wants a real challenge, do it.
Yeah, I do recommend that as a house rule.
And I did it as with just the core set. I didn't add any of the extra Xenos, of course, from anything else. I didn't even add the extra Kickstarter Xenos, like the extra 4 and whatever they are. Just the core box ones. And yeah, it was tough. So let me tell you, the tales of playing this mission. I played it solo. Let's see. So the first time I played it for about an hour over 8 rounds, I think. And it all seemed to be going well. Easy even. And then Mold Spawn Hunters had a different idea with getting a mold spawn hunters, and then a hunter's extra activation right after that. So I think I mold spawned hunters when I searched for gear, and then I got a hunter's extra activation, and they devoured Vivian, who was hanging out in like the green plant zone area room, trying to what do you call it? Like you have a choke point there. Yeah. Actually Vivian and Mitsuki. So that was interesting. Second attempt. I also lost, and that was about 40 minutes over about 8 rounds. It started rough the first 3 rounds. I have a hate relationship with the equipment deck of this game right now. So James, you're always like, I'm not doing chainsaws. Like I don't roll well. For me, I don't draw well. Not in this game anyway, because like it's either like hunters. Like they always come in groups. I just know how to shuffle cards. That's why I don't play Magic the Gathering or anything. Like it's like I always get.
We encounter the same thing. Where,
okay.
Like, guys we'll always start a mission by getting like all tanks or all hunters before anybody else shows up.
So it's not just me for that one. So here's
I'll point out that in the spawn deck, hunters show up more than tanks, which I think is the opposite of Black Death. I think Black Death, like tanks are the second tier, hunters are the third tier. At least that's kind of my impression.
That's
but
extra.
In this one, go ahead.
Oh, I was just gonna say that's extra mean because of the backwards, from what we're used to in other games, a targeting priority order, right? Yep. Tanks / abominations, then workers, then hunters. It's crazy. It's totally different.
Is it?
It's the first time that's ever been like that.
Oh, because it's standard after this.
Yes.
Oh, right. Yeah. See, I'm getting all mixed up because we've been playing all these different versions of Zombicide. I'm like, where am I? I really like how interesting this mission is laid out, because like it entices you to want to split and get those 2 objectives on the upper corners. But then it's got the spawn zone there, and it's got the mold in the 2 spots, and it's just really interesting because it's going to it very well could, and it certainly did for me, muck up your plans and slow you down a bit. So it's like, do I take everybody one and then go to the next one, or do I split them up and then meet in the center and go down? Like there's a lot of great choices to be made in addition to the ones that you guys mentioned before. So that's what I did on that first one. I split up, and then I met back in the center to choke point and come down the middle, and that didn't work out. And then on the second attempt, again, it started rough. It really was about searching this equipment deck, coming back to like a hate relationship with it. So I was like freaking out. I was like, by myself playing solo, but I was still like, what is going on here? Like looking around and jumping up and down even at one point, because, okay. I had, let's see, out of 13, 15, out of 16 cards, because 3 of them were mold spawn cards from the equipment deck. Out of 13 cards, I had 3 ablative armors, 2 MREs, 2 canisters, 1 plenty of bullets, 1 flamethrower, 1 heavy cutter, 2 assault shotguns, and 1 sniper rifle. So like out of 16 cards, only 8 of them, or no, less than 8 of them. 8 of them were not weapons, and 3 of them were mold spawn. So 1911. So
I'd like to just confirm what you just, like, people talk about how great the equipment deck is, but I actually read, and if I'm remembering correctly, only about 1/3 of that deck is actually weapons. The rest is mold spawns, ablative armor, flashlights, search drones, energy cells, canisters, all these things that do not help you kill zombies. And you will definitely run into a case where, like, what is going on? I was told there were guns in this facility, and all I keep finding are MREs, mold spawns, and flashlights.
I said the standard equipment is very good. The equipment deck itself is very gambly.
Yeah, so again, out of 16 cards, I only got 5 weapons. And then I guess you could say a 6th one that was a flamethrower, but it's, it's a special case thing, right? So that was rough, but it was kind of fun too. I'll be honest, but yeah, ultimately, I lost due to too many workers. Strangely enough, I guess I just got too many mold spawn 2 worker cards in like, not directly in a row, but I was just too overwhelmed, and the team was just a little bit too split to handle it with my nightmare difficulty rules. Also, third attempt, I lost. It's 2 hours, 13 rounds. I thought I had it. This time I kept the band together. I ran them in like a clockwise formation on the board. So it's like, I'm just going to go to the right. You know, it's like, this has been brutal. So go to the right, search barely, work my way around the board clockwise. And then the Xenos really hit critical mass at around 8. I still didn't really have great weapons. But then after that, things started to go better for me in terms of the starting to hit orange and getting better abilities, starting to get better weapons. And I got to a point where, again, nightmare mode, where every survivor was down to 1 health and all the ablative armors were spent. And that was really fun nail biting experience, honestly. And, all the hunters were on actually 2 times all miniatures were on the board. Literally all of them. There were no pools left. And so at the end, though, was that all the hunters were on the board, and there was one little guy that I couldn't get that was next to me. And then, of course, an extra activation or hunter card popped up, and that was it. We were done. And that was at round 13. So that was crazy. And now I'm like, wow, I want to find the balance between like regular and like they get extra activations on getting rid of miniatures, running out of miniatures. So that was wild. It was a good time.
I'm really glad you played in this nightmare mode, because I'm like, the great thing about this is there's so many easy ways to tinker about it, and that's a way to dramatically increase the difficulty in an exciting and terrifying way. Because I do think one element of this game is that the Xenos are fairly deterministic. Like the abominations, they can move quick. But other than that, like the odds of like once, for example, you pull that hunter extra activation card, you can be like, okay, cool. Until I reshuffle, these hunters will never move more than 2 zones per turn, because there's nothing in the game that would allow them to.
They did go pretty all in on abominations starting in this one, which is kind of a shift in design philosophy we see moving forward. But as cool as the spoiler abomination is, I agree that they could have dialed it back a bit. How he's really the only wild card.
Yeah, I really think that Army of the Dead has a great fix for the abomination and the concentrated fire. So obviously there's a lot of different ways you can go about it, but basically what they do is they switch the order back to walkers and then brutes. So basically you have to get through all the minions before your concentrated fire can start working. And then 2, the biggest fix I think is that they up the wound count on the abominations, to 5 and 6. So now with those starting weapons, you can't just go kill. Now, obviously, if you're going to try that, you don't want necessarily 12 abomination cards in the deck. You'd want to cut that back. But I really think that's how they fix concentrated fires. They have abominations with different levels of wounds. So you can't just always say, I'm going to take my heavy shotgun. As long as I can roll 2 4+, you're dead.
Yeah. And really that really started with Marvel Zombies, the abominations with crazy health amounts, which kind of it's ground up a relatively different combat system with no damage numbers at all, but it's very concentrated fire-esque. Before this, objectives didn't give you epic weapons, and after this, starting in 2nd edition, they split the 2. Is this the only Zombicide game where you get both 5 XP and an epic weapon for picking up an objective?
I mean, unless it's mission specific.
Yeah.
Which it is in this game too. I mean, it just so happens that that's what they choose in every mission. But it's not really a core rule. It's more of a mission.
It feels like there are always a few things that all missions specify in the book. I feel like a lot of missions have that.
I will say these are the least epic weapons of any epic weapon.
That's true.
It's hey, it's a slightly better version of something you already have, but it requires an energy cell. Does not feel the same as an orchestra.
They are very cool in missions with heavy outside combat, but those aren't super common.
And to use them, you're getting a built-in reroll, so that's nice as well.
Built-in reroll is cool.
I'll also add, when I played with like limited ammo, where you're like finding guns and then you run out of ammo and you drop the guns, getting the prototype weapon. Suddenly prototype weapons are like, oh, thank goodness I have this gun that I can shoot forever. Like I can stop searching for ammo. And I like that impact on the game, that like suddenly if you make ammo limited, suddenly prototype weapons are really powerful for that aspect, that you can just keep shooting them forever.
That's cool. So who else got some more missions in, or that they'd really like to talk about? Was it 3?
Oh no, it is mission 3. All right,
Okay.
the rear guard. This is a mission my group always comes back to. We really like this mission. Not only do you start with a lot of mold on the board, but it's this very interesting take on the kind of survival type mission, and it's also extremely thematic, which like I said, I like about the missions in Invader, where on the exit zone there's these 10 noise tokens. They each represent civilians that you're non-combat civilians that you're evacuating. You're just trying to keep them safe until all of them get through in an orderly fashion onto an escape pod or something, onto an escape ship. So it's a very stand your ground type mission, which in general doesn't happen very often. You don't really have to go around. I don't even think you have to collect all the objectives, do you? It doesn't look like it.
No.
Nope.
But I mean, obviously they're good weapons and they're XP. And it has hallways, so a lot of things matter. That the sentry gun gets a lot of use. The bot can move around. It's just overall, I think this is a very cool mission, and you don't see things as experimental as this very often in Zombicide missions.
This is the only mission that I was just going to say, this is the only mission that I played on my solo playthrough that I used doors with. Basically setting up the doors on either side of the noise tokens as a way to slow down, Xenos if I got too far away from them, because obviously they're all going to be attracted to them if they don't see survivors because of all the noise.
This is also it's interesting because it starts with a burnt mold.
Yep.
It's because you don't want guys to spawn right on top of your evacuees.
Right.
But it's just so you can't close doors right on them.
Yeah.
To add a little more strategy.
Right.
Were you treating Brian just slapped his forehead? Were you treating it as active mold?
Yes. What is wrong with me? It's an off week, okay?
So Nate, what'd you think of the mission, Nate?
Oh, so I think I saw that Ryan had played this one, so I tried it out too. I played it twice. I lost both times at the very moment I thought I had a toehold and I was going to win. This was the one where Vivian did an awesome taunt, pulled an abomination, killed it. She's standing in the mold, and Cole's like, "Ooh, free search action!" And there's a hunter in all the mold, and Vivian's dead.
Oh, that Cole.
Thanks, Cole.
I do think this is also the single mission where having a guy standing by the sentry gun is so cool and so good, because it's got a cross section of 2 spawn zones, and it's got these nice long hallways to shoot down.
I'll also add that when I saw this mission, it highlighted actually an element that I don't like about Invader, or that I struggle with Invader. I struggle with all Zombicides, but Invader a lot, which is Invader does not have the splitting duplication rules. You still have to, if it's equal paths or it's equal noise, you have to part the groups as evenly as you can. But ultimately, it gives you the choice of where to put the aliens that can't be split evenly. And that includes abominations, which it will never split evenly because there's one of them. And especially for a spoiler, that gives you a ton of control over where the mold is going to go. And I wish there was some easy deterministic element, because it's I don't want to have the power to make the game easier for me by making the spoiler dumb, but I also don't want to be the one that has to choose to make the game harder for myself. I want the game to be hard, and I want to work around it.
I mean, you could
rather
rule
than
it.
having to wrestle with where should I move the abomination this turn? The cheap place or the cool place, or what should I do?
I would say, we keep talking about the difficulty problem in Invader. You could rule, and that's an interesting problem with the abomination specifically. I hadn't considered it. I would probably rule that the abomination as I don't know if they're a hive mind or whatever, but it's the leader generally, or at least it appears itself that it has some level of intelligence. It chooses the smarter path, or at least the path to go more directly to the evacuees.
So my house rules for splitting or equidistant is I always just roll die. I roll 1 to 3 that go this way, 4 to 6 that go that way, or you could go odds and evens.
One of the times, exactly one time in all the times I've played Zombicide, was the ending board after we've all left. looked so cool that I took a picture and saved it, and it was on this mission because we had these huge hordes of guys coming down the hallways, like chasing right after us as we were escaping, and it looked so cool, like thematically, and to like remember. And I know that's like there's a whole channel on the Discord about it, like Carnage Reports, but it's very cool storytelling wise. This mission, I like the way it handles it.
Yeah, we didn't talk about the art on the tiles. I love the art on these tiles. I really like the kind of Mars-like ground on the exterior, and just right, like sci-fi, just kind of fits with any sci-fi movie show you've ever seen. You know, it's generic enough too, like that it just kind of works. You know, also it doesn't look like Star Wars, which is good because you're not like, you know, distracted by that. But yeah, because this is like a entirely interior. I mean, there's two little zones that are exterior, but whatever. Entirely interior. It just looks great.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
The as far as artwork goes, I do think the red zones look a little out of place, but for the sake of visual clarity, I think that's a fair trade-off to make.
I'd much rather them be easy to identify than them look good. I mean, you know, just the functionality of them. And I think the red thing is cool because it's kind of bringing up that whole danger thing, alarm. You know, the soldiers got to come and get their gear.
Yeah. I feel the same way about Dark Zones and 2E, where sometimes the cutoff looks a little silly, but I'd rather it be clearly defined than super cohesive.
The only trick I run into is that doors are so abundant in this game that sometimes I'll realize I sent somebody through a wall like 3 turns later because there are doors more often than not.
It's definitely easier to do that in this mission because there's not such defined buildings like there are in other missions.
Yeah, going back to our book club mission 8, you guys were talking about the difficulty of getting to objectives. And in my opinion, the one that was in the far up right corner is the most difficult one to deal with and why you want to get it done early, because there is a wall that blocks you off from being able to get to that airlock from the objective. You've got to go back through the mold zone, you know, to be able to retrieve somebody. So unless you're just sending... what's his name, Jared over there, who's going to be able to automatically shove somebody out of his way. You kind of have to go in there in a team, you know, idea because of that one wall.
This year,
you do have to go through the mold.
Oh man, God. Okay, podcast over. Like, let's start over.
I walked through that wall on my first time too. It's okay.
I walked through that wall dozens of times or whatever it was. A bunch of times, not dozens.
I think we had Xeno's pathfind through that wall, and then like we figured that out 2 turns later, and we're like, whatever, we're about to kill him. Who cares?
I'm just the worst gamer / podcaster right now. I'm telling you.
Well, like, and also look at this. Well, you were gone now, but there's a security room right by that mold that is really cool, conveniently right by an oxygen room. I'm like, oh, this is great. And then, there's actually a wall blocking the security room from the oxygen room.
Brutal.
These walls, man. Sometimes they're there, sometimes they're not.
Yeah.
Yeah, I feel like that's another part with like doors not starting closed is you get really used to just being able to freely walk around buildings. Especially because in missions with this is also on the larger side of buildings. A lot of missions have pretty small buildings where all doors, all adjacent rooms can be walked between because they're basically corridors.
Yeah, just talking overall about missions and throwing some more numbers at you. Out of the 11 missions, there's only 3 that use doors. And there's only 4 missions where mold will not make you lose. It's impossible for it to make you lose. And one of my most favorite thing about all these missions is that they use all 18 tiles. Black Plague, there's a tile that's never used in any of the missions.
Wow, I didn't even know that.
It irritates me. And
how much does it irritate?
Pretty bad. But the other thing that I think is kind of a quirk is mission 10 is the only mission that doesn't have a sentry gun. Even though you still put a purple objective in, mix it in with the red objectives, mission 10 does not have a sentry gun. And my first thought is it's missing from the map, but it's also missing from the key. And so if it's missing from both places, I want to give them the benefit of the doubt that they mean that. But I could still see where you'd say it's a mistake or an oversight.
I guess I don't know where you'd put it. Maybe in the cross section of that hallway right there. But I don't know. Maybe there's just supposed to be a dud objective. Well, how many? There's also a lot of objectives. Is this?
Wow.
Are there too many for all the prototype weapons?
Yes, but you have enough tokens in the box set to be able to put that many red objectives down. So it's not like a case of, oh, I just don't have enough red objectives to put down to fill this.
But do you have enough prototype weapons?
Well, there's only 4 prototype weapons,
Yeah.
right? But there's 8 objectives. So
Oh
you're
no,
never
you're
gonna
right.
have enough.
Yeah, so you run out no matter what.
Right.
All right.
To speak of the turret thing, the fact that it's missing from the key and the map
Yeah.
suggests to me it's an intentional choice.
I don't think it's a misprint. It is odd though.
I think so.
So yeah, I played mission 3 too, and I love this mission. It's so good. I played it once before, like long ago, with like all of the other Kickstarter stuff thrown in, and then I played it this time with just the core box stuff, and it's definitely harder with just the core box stuff. At least in my experience, maybe not all forever.
Yeah,
But
just the number of molds that start here.
yeah,
If you have all the mold spawns, it's crazy.
properly challenging and very varied, and echoing a lot of the sentiments you guys had too with the corridors and the sentry gun and all that. And then just one other fun thing I wanted to throw in is, well, if you want a nightmare of difficulty, then play with that exit zone flipped, because because many times you think you're good and then mold spawn and you're like, oh, then I can't take one off of the base or whatever. But instead of the noise tokens, I use other miniatures, other ones from the Kickstarter stuff. And I was thinking, go even further, and like you can use like stuff from Zombicide 2nd Edition, in the modern setting. You can put those in there too. That'd be fun.
Yep.
Oh, that's kind of cool.
You don't have any like armored dudes, you just have all kind of civilian looking people that maybe look a little fragile compared to your people.
I had a very similar experience. I thought it was a right side up mold token. And the first time I drew a spawn zone and I rechecked and it said, prevent any Xenos from reaching the exit zone until the crew is evacuated. I was like, what? Are you telling me I have to somehow play this mission without ever drawing a mold spawn?
You guys need
And
to
that's
read
when
the
I
key.
realized it was flipped.
Yeah.
So yeah, okay. Here's a complaint about the components. The active and inactive modes of the mold are not distinct enough.
I don't
agree
know.
with
It's
that.
right there on the key.
I know.
No,
I
but
just-
the actual token, though, I agree with you, Ryan. It could be a little bit more obvious.
Yeah.
What's inactive?
Yeah,
and what's active.
I think on this diagram it would be obvious if there weren't so many noise tokens right there.
Yeah.
But like when they're not in like perfect lighting, it is kind of hard to tell.
Yeah. I'm like, I don't need to look at that info box key thing. I'm a Zombicide veteran. I don't need to look at
Yeah.
that.
That's the biggest danger of Zombicide is you're like, oh, why do I even need to look at this? I get it.
Yeah.
I've played so many games
Yeah.
of Zombicide.
I could scan the rules. It's fine.
So Ryan, just to let you know, and to admit my own mistakes, when we first opened up Invader and started playing it, we played the exact same way you played with the extra activations because we didn't bother to read all the fine print, right?
Right.
And
Yeah.
so when we first started playing the game, we thought, wow, this game's really hard. Like we keep running out of miniatures and they keep extra activating, and this is a problem. And then after playing, I don't know, however many missions we played, we went back and read it and we're like, oh, it's not like that. And that's when like I said, it became easier.
Any other missions of note anybody wants to talk about?
I love the mission where there's a kid trapped behind in a room. And
I think I mentioned
in
that
order
one
to
earlier
save
too,
him, I think it's 2 maybe. Yeah. So in this mission, that green objective token is a child. But the thing is, you have to find a child-sized spacesuit to evac him.
Oh, I remember that.
And
Yeah.
I think that's really fun. You're running around the base trying to find a way to safely get this kid through the hostile environment.
Yeah, there's a good one, aka Newt.
Yeah.
Total Newt reference, right?
Yep. They mostly come at night, mostly.
Cool. What did you guys think, like, overall of the mission variety in this game?
I think they kill it. I think they do great at mission variety. I mean, we talked about the two kind of survival-esque missions, and they're so different. One is a standard reach this level. The other is wait this many turns, and just that small difference makes the gameplay so much different. There are very standard, like I talk about how the especially as time goes on, the standard Zombicide mission is go here, get this color, it unlocks this door. Then you do it again, and then you leave. And I don't think there's any like that. I don't think there's, at least not with 2 stages. There's not a whole lot of doors locked until you find X objective. Mission 2 is an example of one. So overall, I think this is a fun one. I remember playing this one.
This, if you're listening, what is this mission?
Xenium Burger.
Xenium Burger.
Yeah.
I remember that name. Why is it called that?
I don't know.
Because you're picking up food supplies. I think food and water are getting low.
It does say yes. Clothes,
I think the
food,
idea
weapons.
is that like this facility is infested with Xenos, but we're treating it like a fast food restaurant, so it's the Xenium Burger.
Sure, I like it.
But if you're just listening, this is a scenario where there are 8 objective tokens clustered pretty closely, but they're separated by walls. Some are outside, some are inside, and some are behind coded doors. And when you open those doors, it triggers other spawn zones. And this is, I like this mission, but it's a real tricky one. There are absolutely critical objectives right by active mold spawn zones, which means you have to really be able to anticipate and control the spoiler abomination if they spawn, because you could lose the game in very easily on the first turn if everyone just ran to the left.
This is also notable because if you've played a lot of Zombicide and looked at a lot of Zombicide missions in the rulebooks, this mission just looks weird. There's so many objectives right there. There's a spawn point in the middle of the map. It's not on the edge. That's pretty weird. There's so many objectives in general. Like there's what is this? 11 objectives in this mission?
Yeah. What I like about it is whenever I see 11 objectives and you have to take them all, I know my people are going orange, for sure. The other thing I like about this one is that decision making on how soon you want to get the objectives, because as you pointed out, Nate, there's some that you really need to get to quickly, otherwise you're going to lose them to the spoiler abomination. But at the same time, you don't want that first one to be green or purple, because then that's going to up your spawn count. And so basically by the end of this game, you're going to have 4 spawn points, which for Invader is a lot. A lot of these games are only 3 spawn points. So keeping it at 2 spawn points as long as you can be a real key to success in this mission. But you can't dally, because you'll lose those objectives to the spoiler abomination.
There's actually an absurd 3 spawn point solution, which is you can bypass the green door by running outside externally and accessing the second airlock, and it can get you to all those tokens without ever you having to open the green door. It's just absurd. I love that it's there, because it's this weird temptation of like, what if I just sent one guy out there, but you're going to be opening the purple door anyway, that purple thing. It's a trap, but it's a really fun trap.
I really like, again, the tempo of this game, like how much more of an action game it is, like right up front, just action, and so I really like that pacing. So that's one of the reasons, like, I had a hard time with fantasy, because so Zombicide Invaders, when I really started to get into Zombicide, and like this is like, yeah, when I started collecting, and I was okay, I will Kickstarter and back everything and just get everything from now on, because this is just so great. Especially because, in second edition, they took a lot of their learnings from this one, and a lot of that kind of, I think a lot of the pacing and tempo is that faster pace, and which I enjoy more than the slower crawl. I think there is something great about a survival game and the zombie genre, and having that slow burn up to finally the critical mass. But I don't know, if you lean into this game more of what it really is, it's like a great dice chucking, run and gun, hack and slash game, even more so than that slow burn.
I agree with that. I I love the slow burn of Black Plague. I feel like it has its own atmosphere and its own tension. And that's why I wouldn't be like, I like Invader more. But Invader definitely, like, it has that cool feel of within 3 turns, it is going to be a struggle for survival where you're throwing a lot of bullets at them and a lot of them are coming at you. Where if this was a game of Black Plague, by the 3rd turn, we would still be in a little, we would be in a one-room structure, everyone's searching.
Yeah.
As the zombies slowly made their way to us.
Speaking of early game, I think Invader is the one where you feel like the pre-yellow action economy hit the least because of that. Because the weapons are so good and you can kill so many zombies pretty much no matter what you have. You feel a lot less sluggish for only having your 3 actions than you do in like when you play 2nd edition. You can really feel having 3 actions until you get to yellow.
I think that ties in hand to hand too with the difficulty of the missions. Just looking over when my characters went yellow, the first 4 easy missions, 0 through 3, I wasn't going yellow until the 5th or 6th turn, whereas the last 3 hard missions, I was going yellow by turn 3. So, it makes a big difference, I think, in the difficulty, the mission, how many spawn points, where they are, and how many mold zones, that kind of thing.
All right. So rules you might have missed. There's a lot here because there's just so much different. So many different rules, so much uniqueness to this game from the others, especially at this time in like the whole Zombicide franchise. But okay. So we talked about like no ammunition type weapons you can be used outside because the atmosphere doesn't support the combustion. So I've seen a lot of these on my list here are because I've seen people ask this repeatedly on the Discord or Board Game Geek or Facebook. There is friendly fire in this game too, and then that also counts for machines. It's the same way as Black Plague on any misses. Those get applied to your buddies. The energy cell, people miss this a lot, gives re-rolls to any energy weapon, including even the cattle prod.
And one thing on that real quick, when you have an energy cell and also plenty of bullets, because it's equipped to a weapon like the energy cell in this one, it's not used in your backpack.
And if you don't mind, I'd like to point out something too about friendly fire. How does that work with concentrated fire? So if you miss 3 times, you don't hit your friends with damage 3 weapon. Concentrated fire doesn't work in friendly fire. You take 3 damages. So you could split that up amongst different survivors if you miss 3 times. So for example, if I have the light machine gun and I'm trying to kill a tank in the zone of somebody else and I concentrate fire, I get the 2 hits, but I get 3 misses. Those 3 misses don't become damage 3 to that survivor.
Oh, okay. I understand what you're saying.
Yeah, okay. That's how I assumed it worked.
Yeah.
I just wanted to point that out in case people were like, well, I'm concentrating fire, so if my hits do that, then...
I could definitely see that.
Yeah, you go, concentrated fire means it all has to be applied to one person. Well, then, like, the reverse is not true. It's the standard friendly fire rules, which is distributed as you see fit.
Survivors can use the sentry gun while standing in the zone. That's just like one of my favorite things. It's just such like a cinematic movie moment. Tanks deal 2 damage and abominations deal 3 damage. So if you're used to playing modern or something, you might, skim over that. Look out for that. Damaging survivors. So damage can be split among survivors and active machines that are in that zone. They have to be active, which is interesting. So including, you could put all of the damage on one survivor or all of it on an active machine. You can split it how you want to that way. So you can sacrifice a machine so you don't lose the mission. But, all damage from that source deals multiple damage, like tanks and abominations cannot be split. And we talked about that earlier. When running out of miniatures, no extra activation for the given miniature, only spoiler abomination. This is hilarious because I wrote this or copy pasted this in and I still didn't say it. God, kill me. All right. I'm just too busy. Okay. No mold outside. I heard that like even on like their demo video that they put on YouTube, Simon did that. They were putting mold outside. It's kind of funny. No spawns on inactive mold. When drawing a mold spawn card, if there are not enough miniatures to fill the active mold zones, all abominations get an extra activation, and place a spoiler abomination, if you have any, in one of the active mold zones which didn't receive enough Xenos of the indicated type. So that
is kind of another area where like player choice just kind of innately makes it easier.
Yeah. That's a rule I did not know existed. I just saw this on Discord like yesterday or the day before. So thank you, Discord. Mold acts as rooms for interior line of sight, and inactive mold acts as corridors for interior line of sight.
Oh.
So that's really interesting. Not that it ever comes up, right? Barely ever. Think of corridors like external zones in terms of line of sight and searching, so you cannot search there. No line of sight through airlocks. I've seen a lot of people get tripped up on that. Therefore, no shooting through airlocks. You can't place doors on airlocks. There's no spawning in rooms when entering a building. And the door activation. Don't forget to door activate. And it's free. It's not an action.
I have a question, too, about the searching. Do you guys play search drone? If a soldier has a search drone, he can search in hallways?
No.
Or corridors?
No.
I do.
I feel like we've gone back and forth. I feel like this question comes up every time. I'd have to read the exact text, but
because a corridor is a building.
Yep.
Yeah. It does say any type of building zone.
But it sounds like mechanically the search drone can just kind of find an assault rifle in a corridor that wasn't there before.
Yeah.
Yeah.
I totally assume it's like finding the grate and you bend over and you pick the grate up off the floor and you reach down there and there's a gun wrapped in oilcloth.
Nice.
It's like in the air ducts up above you. You can't reach it.
Well, cool. So a rule you might have missed. Corridor is a room for your search drone. Thank you, James. Okay.
Well, it was more of a question to the group on how you play it.
Yeah.
Like I said, I think we've ruled it both ways. I feel like we always have this discussion.
Yeah.
I feel like without it, it becomes such a weak item for a civilian, right?
I guess without it, it doesn't do anything for a civilian.
Yeah, I wouldn't think that it would be much use to a civilian.
Okay, we're gonna dive in the Kickstarter and expansions for the next one, but we always like to talk about the essentials expansions. People are looking for that when they're listening to or watching a review. So what are like the essential expansions for you for Zombicide Invader?
So I think this is kind of a weird question for Invader specifically because the campaign had 2 core boxes. It had Dark Side, and it also had a retail expansion, Black Ops. But Black Ops didn't have any extra zombies. It had some missions, I think.
10 missions.
Missions and a Juggernaut abomination.
It had missions, and it had the
6 new survivors.
Yeah, it did have more survivors. The Juggernaut, I feel like, is every time it shows up, every incarnation of that abomination gimmick, I feel like is really boring. And Dark Side, I feel like the ability to mix the two is limited because of how cohesive they are with the types of zombies in them. So really, the only thing you're getting from either of those two is more survivors and more weapons, if you want to maintain the kind of the spawn deck. Because either way, if you dilute the abominations, or especially if you mix drillers and spoilers, it becomes a lot easier, which is already a problem. So outside of that, and that's everything available retail. I think it's a great core box as a core box, but I think if you get both and mix them together and try to play it as one game, it gets a lot easier if that's something you're trying to avoid. If you're willing to get stuff from Kickstarter, I think the extra zombie types are awesome. The xenomobs are wolves from fantasy, and they're all representative of older zombie types. There's the spitters and the xenomobs and the seeker workers. Seeker workers are just kind of whatever. That gimmick I'm not a huge fan of either. I think it's very situational. But the other two are very cool. And the driller blitzer, but that doesn't really affect Invader.
So if you just picked Invader up off the shelf or ordered it on Amazon or whatever, and you played it and you love it, I want more stuff to go with it. Can keeping in mind your pocketbook and what you could immediately just start playing with Invader, I would say Black Ops is your next purchase, just because you don't need anything else other than Invader to play it. It gives you 10 new missions. It does give you new survivors, so you got a new survivor variety. And also, to me, the missions are kind of the backbone of this game. The more missions you have, the more times you want to play it. If you just end up playing the same old missions over and over again, it's going to get a little stale. So more missions to me is a lot of value. After that, if you want to kick it up and spend some more money, Civilians Extras box is probably your next purchase. And then the promo Xenos pack. As Schmedley brought up, Dark Side doesn't just directly mesh with Invader. Absolutely, you can mix them together, but it gets a little odd. And just right out of the box, mixing the two without you having to put some thought into it, wouldn't be the way I would go. But you absolutely could do it. And it's a good value because you get a whole core game. But I think Black Ops would probably be my next purchase. Nate?
So if we're sticking just to retail, I think Black Ops, there's also something called Survivors of the Galaxy, which is the babyface abomination for survivors. I think Black Ops, because it comes with 10 missions, and that's great. But I also want to give this pitch that getting even one additional abomination is great. You don't even need to shuffle the cards in the deck, because if you run out of a certain xenotype when spawning, the rules say spawn another abomination like in your collection.
Ooh,
You
I
don't
do
have to
like
draw the
that
card.
to get around diluting the spoiler spawns.
Yeah, it automatically adds a second abomination in. And both the Juggernaut from Black Ops, I mean, like, James, I think Schmedley, you were saying, like, it's the mechanic, but, like, I like the fact that, like, hey, you can use concentrated fire to kill abominations easily, except not this one. And then the Survivors of the Galaxy comes with Babyface, which is such a nightmare in that he got spawned because there's Xenos all over the place, and if you kill them, all of them get an extra activation. Trying to manage that is such a nightmare that I think that's a very powerful abomination. So those two retail expansions, I think, both add a really cool abomination element to your game. I'll also pitch in that, like, although it's not retail, like on the Game Steward, the Civilian Extras box is like $35 right now, which is straight up bonkers. It is like, I think, 8 additional abominations, all the extra Xenos except for the Blitzers, and like 36 survivors. I was, before we started recording, I was telling James, like, I am struggling with the desire to buy a second one of those just because it's so cool. Like,
Right.
and also I would say, I'll just finish by saying, and having a second spoiler abomination, to the degree that if you were playing this game and you want to make it harder, just buy any miniature and say that is a spoiler abomination and play with a second spoiler abomination. Will have a huge impact on your game, and it doesn't require any cards or anything.
That's actually what I was going to say. I was about to say I normally largely discount for difficulty reasons the like extra zombies packs, as cool as they are. But really, I think just for getting an extra spoiler, this might be a situation where I make an exception. Whereas, like, if you just get the pack, but to kind of go with James, if you get that Juggernaut, which again I think it's boring. I don't like it. Does add difficulty. I don't like a challenge being now we have to build a search deck, and that's the objective now. But if you got Black Ops, you have all those other benefits, and you have an extra mini that you could say this is now a spoiler. He looks a little weird.
Which is saying something when you look at the spoiler abomination, the dude with like little penguin legs and 4 super muscular arms.
Yeah.
So I can't believe that I was remiss in saying this, though, but the other reason to buy the Black Ops box is because it comes with 2 new bots. And that alone, just
right.
more robots.
New bots are huge. I think that has
that's worth it.
The meteor gun that I said.
Yeah,
I really like
that's how you
gun.
kill the Juggernaut, is with the meteor gun.
There you go.
So, yeah, I mean, just 2 new bots, and you got me sold.
I did say that that's a very cool extra thing. And it's cool that Invader has that because abomination diversity for the first time is a little detrimental. Brian?
Yeah, so the obvious pick for me is the Civilian Pledge. If you can get your hands on that for a decent price, like poor Zombicide Invader. Like I think a lot of people think that it's not as good because it's always going on sale or clearance online. Like it kind of always has been. Miniature Market was doing it for a long time, and now Game Steward. I don't know if they printed too many or if the
I don't know what that
reputation
was
is
either.
not good, like or what. But yeah, it's like such a great way to spend your money, in my opinion, because I like this so much. But yeah, Civilian Pledge, of course, you get a ton of survivors. You get a ton more Xenos. You get the variety of my favorite add-on to this game is the variety of xenotypes. So I'm always going to be a fan of different enemy types. Adding the xenomorphs, which you cited as like dogs, but no, they're like crows, aren't they? They just move.
That's
through.
what I was thinking of. Yeah,
Yeah.
I kind of questioned it because I was like, that's not the right zombie type.
Yeah,
Sorry.
and then
I don't
flingers
have
have
crows.
flingers have ranged action, so you'll be using doors when you got flingers around, more likely anyway. And yeah, so like I recommend first that Civilian Pledge, and then after that I think the next, and of course it has all those abominations that we talked about. A lot of cool abomination variety. Like they have a lot of different abilities on there that are super cool. And then after that, I would get the promo Xenos pack. It's got 8 more flingers, 8 more xenomorphs, 8 driller blitzers, which is a dark side style crab monster thing, and 8 seeker workers. And the seeker workers are what are these? Are they the same as the seekers from classic?
Yeah,
So
whenever you pull a card, all of them extra activate.
Yeah.
Like it's a little weak of a gimmick, but it comes up occasionally. And I think they all look silly. They're all like doing this.
Yeah, they're all going
coming
for a
in.
hug.
Hey! Yeah.
Yeah. I mean, those miniatures look way too similar to the just the workers. So there's a
They do
problem
look
there.
very similar to workers.
So he's got to paint them different.
They also released like a little base ring kit, which I wound up caving and getting. Because now all my seekers have white bases, and I used the gray ones. It took some doing because they don't fit exactly, but I used the gray ones on my runners from Green Horde because they look, in a lot of contexts, identical to the walkers. And so
that is definitely a progression of how to make runners look different that Zombicide went throughout the early years.
Yeah, so those are my 2 essential expansions. Beyond that, of course, Dark Side is really cool. Black Ops is really cool. Those 2 games, Dark Side is a standalone expansion. So you could play it. You could just get Dark Side and never play Invader. Black Ops is an expansion to those. But yeah, what's cool about those is like they each have their own different vibe. Like when you're playing as just those green dark side, green armor, dark side people, has a different feel. And the Black Ops has a very Black Ops feel. They feel like
I do so like, cool. And both of them, I touched on this earlier. We were talking about classes. The core game does not expand on it a whole lot, but Dark Side, Green Horde, Dark Side, Black Ops, and a bunch of other expansions like the Kabuki Gang and the Plague Gang, and those guys, they all expand on it a lot more because there's like, here's a specific group of soldiers. They're all soldiers, but they also have like a secondary class where they get their own starting equipment and they have their own abilities. And some of the starting equipment is really cool. I think just as far as artwork, the Black Ops starting equipment, They like look like the most badass guys. They're like the elite soldiers because they get these cool gauntlets and these awesome guns, and all of them get both. It's very cool.
Such a great vibe.
Yeah.
All right. Who is this version of Zombicide for and not for?
I think if all you want to do is get a box of Zombicide, that's a really good game without needing to add stuff. I think by the merit of how intricate and detailed the spoiler abomination is, among other things, this is a great core box to be like the only Zombicide product you own. So I'd say like budget wise, obviously if you're a huge sci-fi fan, that goes for pretty much any setting. And I guess on the notion of difficulty, it's a very interesting problem to try to tinker with it. So if you're a big fan of making house rules in homebrew, here's something to really think about. This whole podcast, we've been speculating on different ways to mess with it. So
Yeah, I think this is for people that love sci-fi and want an easy game to play. And I don't mean easy as in difficult. I mean light rules compared to some other games. Like all versions of Zombicide, one of the strengths of this game is how easy it is to get into, how easy it is to get through the rules, how easy it is to understand the missions and what's going on, and how easy it is, to work with your friends on, how to win it. So that's who I would say it's for people that like cooperative games, but with a sci-fi bent. Maybe they've seen modern Zombicide or fantasy, and they're like, "Yeah, I like cooperative games, but I don't like that theme." And really, honestly, the only people I would say this is not for is if you like Zombicide and you play a lot of other Zombicide games, but you're concerned about the difficulty level, then this might not be for you. I think that it's very easy to make this game as difficult as you want it. So that's not why I would say to stay away. But that's who I would say it's not for. Nate?
Yeah, I think this is for people who love the movie Aliens. Like, to me, every like I talked about, like Vivian, who's the Ripley stand-in, having taunt. I think so many elements of this, to me, call to scenes or tropes from that movie or movies like it. So if you want to like engage in that kind of story, I think this is your game. I think this is not the Zombicide game for people who love zombies, because I mean, Schmedley, you do make the point that apparently these are zombie aliens. I did not
These
know
are
that.
zombies.
But
Read the lore.
thank you. I promise I'll read the lore next time. But like, to me, this just feels like a big gulf of different distance from The Walking Dead. This isn't the same genre at all. And so I also feel like, oddly, like this isn't the version of Zombicide you want to get if you want to get the hot one that everybody like super celebrates or loves. Like that's probably Marvel Zombies or Black Plague.
Yeah.
This one I feel
Marvel
is a little.
edition.
Yeah, I feel this is a little underappreciated, and it's a bummer. But I mean, if you don't want to spend all your time advocating for the version of Zombicide you love, maybe just get Black Plague or Modern or something.
Just going off of what James said, now that I feel like there's a much smaller niche for kind of like rules light sci-fi games than for on the fantasy side, because a lot of the big sci-fi games I can think of are like the massive, take 8 hours to play kind of campaign style games, and so I feel like there definitely are some, but as far as this kind of dice chucker, beer and pretzel style, there's less of that for hardcore sci-fi fans.
I think this version of Zombicide is great for, again, sci-fi fans and fans of the movie Aliens, who people have always wanted to experience more of that movie, that one especially. This game is great for. It's funny, like a little story. When I first got this game, I was so excited. I got all the Kickstarter stuff in. I got it actually like second market, like it was after the point, when I got it on like eBay, that I realized like, this is what I need to be doing in life. I brought it to, okay, don't bring this game if you're a Euro gamer or if you have a group that are pretty like it's not called the Eurogamer group, but they were a Eurogamer group. Don't bring this game, because I did that. It was so stupid. I was just so excited about it, and they're like way turning their noses up at me.
Yeah.
And yeah, I was like, okay, that was stupid. But
what's funny, the definition of Ameritrash.
Yeah. But what's funny is I brought this to a mini con later that had like a crossover of like, different player types. And, a lot of those Eurogamer group people were there. And the one guy was with his son, his like teenager son. And his teenager son was like, I want to play that game, because I had it kind of set out and was like ready to setting it up and just trying to find players. And his dad's like, oh, God. And his body language is so overtly like, I gotta put up with this, like how many hours is this gonna be of my life? But you know what, this guy had fun by the end. I could tell he didn't want to admit it, and I think I asked him, I was like, what did you think? And he's like, yeah, it's all right. But he was having fun, because he was like, oh my God, like he got into it. He's like, oh, there's some strategy, some tactics, like some meat that happens actually in the gameplay when things get really heavy. So yeah, I think it was great for that. But yeah, if you're not really a Eurogamer, or if you're not really, well, you're not listening to this if you're not a dice chucker lover type of person. I have to echo what Nate said about, like, you know, if you're looking for a zombie game, this is not a zombie game, so you might not like it.
Read the lore.
Yeah, read the lore. Yeah, it's
lore.
It literally is in the beginning of the rule book. The lore, it's kind of long, but yeah, it's in there. Yeah, and like, let's see, what else if you're not? I mean, I
Ryan,
guess like, yeah.
Oh, I was just gonna jump, like, sort of. I was at this like weekend hangout where we were playing games. These are people who are playing a lot of Euro games, and I had brought both Ankh and this, and I was like, I didn't haul both of these to Chicago to not play them both, so we're gonna play one. And I was like, I think I'm gonna try to get them to play Zombicide, but I'm really worried it's gonna be too long and they're gonna hate it. But I set it out, and my friend, who's very much a Euro, I think like tends to stray Euro gaming, we played it a little bit, and I'm familiar enough with this game that I can go through the zombie activations pretty quickly. And as he saw how the visual impact of this game, the way the zombies move, the way things coalesce and shift, and the way everything is so simple. There's no tokens oh, he's got 3 hit points. Wait, let's do an armor save for this guy. It's just all happening so quickly. At the end of that, I literally hear him go, oh, shoot, I think I need to get this game. I don't think he's going to get this game, but he is texting me because he's like, my son loves, what's the Star Wars like war game? That
Imperial Assault? Oh,
Imperial Assault, or the
Legion.
When they, yeah. He's always asked me to play Legion, but I think this is what he wants to play. Nice. He just wants to like blast stormtroopers. So I think I'm going to adapt these rules to Legion so he can just play Zombicide Invader, but with Legion.
That sounds amazing. Yeah, and you know, yes, this game has a reputation for being easier. I don't know, like I don't think it's as easy as everybody's sort of like. I think that idea is blown out of proportion, honestly.
And now, I think a big part of that is people get the cards, they shuffle all 50 of them together, don't even look at that page in the rule book we brought up earlier. And that'll make it super easy. If you shuffle together Dark Side Dimension, it'll make it super easy. And even if you're doing everything right and it still feels easy, it, like we've talked about, I don't know, I feel like Zombicide is a game you home rule, you house rule. I don't feel like we usually play as strict as possible for the purposes of our book club mission, but I feel like if you're playing Zombicide for fun, it's a game where you're at the table and you're like, what do you guys feel about this? I think this is kind of weird. You want to do it this way instead?
I'll also make the argument that I believe all the bonus abominations, which virtually everybody has, because everyone gets in there, if you just shuffle them into the deck, I think you have made the game much easier, because most of those abominations die easily because they're abominations, and this is a game where it's easy to kill abominations. So they die easily, they give you 5 XP, which make you stronger, and they leave no lasting impact on the board. The spoiler abomination is the only one where it's like,
he's so good.
If you kill him, he leaves behind a bunch of spawn zones, and you have to deal with those. And like, so diluting the deck with a ton of like cool abominations that will die instantly as soon as they get near you is not going to make the game harder.
Yeah, that's got to be part of why it has that reputation, because everybody wants to add more stuff to their Zombicide games because you have so much stuff.
It's very tempting.
Yeah, and there's a very delicate balance with this core game. I think it's really well designed as it is.
Yeah.
Unfortunately, it's probably the worst design in terms of just adding everything in. You know, just adding more and more of the other stuff.
And it's unfortunate because that is at odds with what people think Zombicide is, especially if you're coming from like 2nd edition or Marvel, the 2 biggest entry points. Those games thrive on getting a whole bunch of different boxes and mixing everything together. And this one just doesn't.
Yeah. What is your favorite and least favorite thing about this version of Zombicide?
So I started off saying Concentrated Fire. I really like it as a mechanic. I'm glad it showed back up in Marvel. I'm glad it's back in Army of the Dead. The more I think about it, I think it is the Spoiler Abomination. I think he's the most mechanically interesting scenario-dependent abomination in the franchise, unless you count Galactus, but that might be cheating. So the spoiler abomination is so cool. I think he's definitely my favorite core abomination. He might be my favorite abomination.
My favorite thing are the robots. Absolutely love the robots. All the other robots that come in the other boxes are all fun. There's even robots that turn into abominations, which is also fun.
We didn't even talk about that, yeah.
Yeah, obviously we'll talk about that next episode, but I just love robots. I think they're really fun in this game. Like I said, I think of them as pets. I'd rather lose a survivor than lose the robot, you know?
Have you ever seen that video of like that girl doing that dating video and she's like, I love all the cats.
Sure.
It's like I love all the bots.
Yeah, I mean, I was rooting for Chappie in that movie. You know, it's
yeah.
But you know, yeah, my least favorite thing about this game is all the other people I play Zombicide with won't play it with me. So that makes it it's my least favorite Zombicide.
Yeah,
it's a bummer.
Oh, I didn't say my least favorite.
Nate?
Okay. I mean, I originally in my notes, I was just like, I just love the way how everything holds together. Nothing feels like extraneous, but drilling down, I'm going to say I like Mold the best. I feel like I love the way it reshapes the board. Cool. I love the thematic implications of it. I love the menace of it. The least favorite thing is just splitting and having to manually decide or roll a die or do something. Like I just have not yet figured out a way, because I love in Black Peg that usually you find these lanes and the zombies just move and I don't have to think about it. Maybe I go 1, 2, 3, 4. Okay, shorter way, that's clear. But with all the abundance of rooms and doors and 90 degree boxes in this map, I feel like I'm constantly being like, where will this one go? I guess he'll go here. Or should he go here? Should I choose the thing that's good for me? It's a small thing, but you asked me for the least favorite thing of it, and that's it, in a sea of otherwise things I really enjoy.
Yeah, Nate, Green Horde suffers from this same problem too.
Yeah,
all the hedges. You know, the hedges just cause such splitting problems that it just becomes, you know, okay, these are just a grid of 9, so which way are they going to go? It's kind of the same thing over and over again, and same thing with these tiles. The tiles are cool and everything, but they are just, you know, boxes of squares, and so there's not a lot of opportunity for them to really want to go anywhere else, but either to the left or to the right.
Yep. I mean, it's a pretty minor problem, but I had to pick something.
Going off of that, and this is more of like, I wish this was different than my least favorite thing. As much as I like the spoiler abomination, I think a big problem with the other abominations is that nothing else does anything with mold except the spoiler abomination. I think maybe if there was some kind of blanket rule in Invader that maybe wasn't present in Dark Side, that like when an abomination gets an extra activation, not when it moves, it places the mold no matter what kind it is. That would be pretty cool. Something like that. That might be a little too much, especially with how much abominations extra activate in this one.
I think the abomination in the comics volume 1 interacts with mold.
The Xenium Horror from the Soldier Pledge extras.
That's what I'm thinking of.
It's basically like the rat zombie. It comes into play close to the noisiest zone, but it comes into play 2 zones away and drops a mold when it drops. But I think that kind of underscores your point, Schmedley, which is like, that's the only other abomination that does mold, and it's 1 mold zone when it comes into play.
Yeah,
that's or
to go off my house rule idea, if every abomination, if you want to shuffle in more, but you say whenever you kill one, it drops a mold, that'd be kind of cool.
Yeah, my favorite thing, gosh, it's so hard to pick my favorite thing. I guess I'm just going to say...
A lot of cool ideas.
Yeah. Like the theme. The theme is so great. Like
the theme is very good.
The sci-fi theme and the way that they've done it is just amazing. And it just, you're playing Aliens, the board game, pretty much. It's fantastic. And then my least favorite thing I talked about already before, which is just the balance gets all out of whack when you start adding all this cool, fun, extra stuff. The whole game just gets a little bit out of balance there. So it's kind of a drag. But we'll be talking more about that in the next episode, actually, how to kind of help with that. All right. If you like Zombicide Invader, you might also like...
2 suggestions this time. And the first one is one I've been waiting to actually ask Nate about. Nate, have you ever played Nemesis?
I've played Nemesis once, and I would rather play Zombicide Modern Edition.
Really? Okay. Because all your house rules and your love of aliens that you were talking about, it just kept making me think of Nemesis. Nemesis, for the listeners, is I just recently got into it. It's quickly become probably one of my favorite non-Zombicide games. It's much more heavily alien inspired, whereas we've been talking about how the inspiration for this is more Warhammer adjacent. Nemesis has a very cool card action system. It has it's less of fighting hordes and more of weighing your options of running away versus fighting a few super dangerous aliens. There's limited ammo. You can close doors to slow them down. There's a possible traitors, but you can play without it. It's got a whole bunch of expansions. My other suggestion is probably, and one I can guarantee probably nobody listening is thinking of, is the 2011 Gears of War board game, which is, ironically, has a very similar card action system to Nemesis, but thematically is closer to Invader. It's kind of that action hero style. The Locusts are a lot more similar to the Xenos. It is the same way where instead of fighting a big horde, you're more likely to kill 1 or 2 guys per turn. But I've also been having a lot of fun with that. I don't know how easy it is to find now. I'm pretty sure it's out of print.
Yeah, I'm going to echo Schmedley on Nemesis. If you're the kind of guy that's like, Invader's too easy, I don't want to play it, play Nemesis.
It's a real
game is brutal. It's I mean, you're more likely to lose that game than win it. It's a brutal game. And then you've already touched a lot on it. So we've been talking about aliens. Well, Aliens, Another Glorious Day in the Core from Gale Force 9 is aliens. It says it on the box. There's no having to think about whether it's aliens or not. It's aliens. And it's a cooperative game with a lot of fun mechanics to it. It's a little bit more fiddly. It's a lot more fiddly than Invader. So if you like that kind of thing, then go for it. And then the only other thing, if you want a little bit lighter sci-fi cooperative game, would be Star Wars: The Clone Wars from Z-Man Games. It's a pandemic. It's based on the pandemic rule system only with dice. But unlike some of the other pandemic systems that had come out before it, you also have kind of individual goals that you can achieve along with doing cooperative things. So it's a good entry level cooperative game in the sci-fi realm. Nate?
You've already named several of my suggestions. I had Gears of War.
Really?
I'm going to date myself because I'm going to date myself by naming a bunch of out-of-print games. But Gears of War, there was a game called Galaxy Defenders, which was a big Kickstarter one. But who did that? I don't know if it was Z-Man or Ares Games, but that was a campaign-style one. But it was like you kill aliens. Death Angel, the card game, if you want a card game version, which was it's the card game version of Space Hulk that Fantasy Flight put out, very out of print. But that was just another fun. We marched down a hallway and we killed aliens. Nemesis, I want to say here, like, people love Nemesis. I'm sure Nemesis is great. I just only played it once. It took a super long time. And the person that was teaching it to me was the traitor. And so, like, at the very, like, we went through all of this effort. Made the best choices I could. And then we get the end, and the person who's taught me the game is like, I sabotage the engines. You all die, but I win. I'm like, okay.
When I was teaching my group, we played full co-op.
I feel like I would have a much better time full co-op. I love Battlestar Galactica because I know how many traitors are going in the deck, but like the idea of like a game that is incredibly punishing, and also there might be someone who would randomly is going to win if we lose. Anyways, never mind.
The possible traitor is very different than like there is a traitor.
So I would say go play Nemesis. I'm going to be playing Zombicide Invader, but y'all go play Nemesis and have a great time doing it.
I am shocked that you were going to say Gears of War. I've never even seen anybody mention that game's existence.
I have Gears of War Zombicide Invader cards. Like, I found some online and I printed them out and put them on cardstock because they're cool miniatures, and I was like, I could use these in Invader sometime. the thing about it is, like, the most recent time I pulled it out, I tried to play and I'm like, this mission is kind of weird, and I wait, how do I even progress? And I had to check like against the rule book, and I realized I had set it up wrong, and I just wasted an hour playing.
Is it the one where you need the big guy to knock down walls?
No, it's the one where it's actually 2 missions starting separate, but the mission cards don't say that. Only the rule book says it, and I had to read the rule book, but I didn't know. Anyways, it ties to something that I think James mentioned about, like, the fact that a great thing about Invader, even compared with other Zombicide games, is how easy and clean it is to set up. Like, throw those spawn tokens on there, throw out the robot and the turret, and you're ready to go. Whereas thinking about how I have to set up Black Plague, it's like you look over the map and where are the doors? Have I got all the doors? But the doors in place. And anyways, I think
now that we're in the post-door era of Zombicide, I feel like setup just gets a lot easier. I think that was a big thing holding it back, because early Zombicide did feel like, and a big part of that was also now we've all played a lot more than anybody had when first edition came out. But it does feel like setup is a lot more streamlined.
Yep. But yeah, I have a copy of Gears of War. It's a Corey Kaniza game, who also designed Battlestar Galactica and that Death Angel card game and a bunch of stuff. I love his designs. It's a fun little game, and it does a really good job.
Yeah, if you're I don't know how big of overlap we have with video game fans here, but if you like Gears of War, it's probably the most faithful adaptation directly from video game to board game that I've seen.
Yep. I always wanted to try that. Yeah. Let's see. You guys have covered it pretty much. And I'm like, I haven't played that many sci-fi games, at least in this way. I'm more of them like the big epic 4X or Euro games.
Yeah.
But the only thing I can add is Space Hulk. It's an older game, a classic, and I haven't played it, unfortunately, so I'm just kind of adding it third hand, or because I've seen more than once someone say like, "Ooh, Zombicide Invader is so good, like it's what I wanted Space Hulk to be." So for what it's worth, that's what I've seen. Just passing that along.
I recently got it. There's another Warhammer game that looks kind of similar. It's called Space Marine Adventure. Labyrinth of the Necrons or something. I haven't played it yet, but a friend got it for me because he said it looked similar to Invader. So honorable mention to that. I don't know how similar it actually is.
And then the only like sci-fi co-op dungeon crawl style game that I've played a lot of aside from this is Star Wars Imperial Assault. Yeah, it's a lot heavier rules wise and fiddly and but like also very, rewarding and very tactical, and it plays as it comes as a one versus many, but you can get the free app that FFG makes and play it fully co-op against the app, which is really cool. Yeah. So it's a great game. It's a good time. Anybody have final thoughts on Zombicide Invader?
I would say I wrote down some final thoughts, and I was like, I think in gameplay terms for me, this game kind of represents peak Kickstarter bloat, because I feel like it is a very good game that can be dismantled by undiscerning addition of all these awesome Kickstarter things, like how too much can actually spoil a game.
I think that just goes to show how solid the core game is. Like I said, this is the first Zombicide where I'd say like you're getting a great experience with the core game. With a lot of them, I'd say go get the first edition, get the Berserkers, second edition, get all the goofy brand deals. But with this, like if you have the core game, you have a great game. So
I've said in the past on the podcast a few times, like I tend to like an easier game, or I tend to play an easier game at home. And that's like for two reasons. One, because my wife definitely prefers that. So when I'm playing with her, I'm like, oh, how can I make this a little easier? And then two is like, I'm always anxious when I'm bringing this to a group of new people, right? Again, like Nate was saying before, you don't know how salty they're going to be because we don't win, So I'm always like nervous. And so when I got this game, I really enjoyed throwing everything in and just having a romp of a time. Just a romp of a aliens time with all these crazy different xenos, flying xenomorphs, and wiggly guys and crab guys and and flingers that are spitting whatever at you, and it's just, and all these crazy abominations and all their crazy different abilities. So yeah, it's just a super fun time. And after a while I was like, what, it's kind of probably better balanced with just the spoiler abominations, but like whatever, I'm having fun. And so I think it's great, like if you want to have a more casual time, throw it all together and have do it. It's great. It's a great time, especially when you're super into the sci-fi theme.
Yeah, we spent a long time kind of disregarding the extra abominations. This episode wasn't about them, but they are cool, just like in any other game. Like if it'll take more tweaking to get like your desired difficulty level if you're someone who would complain about the difficulty, and it takes away like some of what I think is really cool about the spoiler abomination. But there's still extra mechanics to play around with, especially if you've played a lot of Invader already.
I was also going to add, I think they've taken some really cool lessons from Invader for White Death, because like for White Death has corruption, which is kind of mold. It's like this extendable thing that will spawn zombies and can trigger an auto loss. And I think the enhancement they made is I watched an unboxing so I could read some of the rules in White Death. When you draw a Necromancer card, if there are no Necromancers in play, you spawn the Defiler, you spawn the Corruption Maker. If he's already in play, you get to spawn another Necromancer. But that idea of like, okay, let's make sure that the core gameplay element is always hitting the table first, and then you can add all the cool stuff on top of that.
That kind of comes back to like how many things say the abomination spawns, like the splitting and stuff. So,
yep.
Yeah, that's very cool.
Oh, and the other thing too is like I love the variety and depth of different mechanics that are going on here. Again, like it's a little bit like a tower defense game, and it, like sometimes based on the mission or the way the things are flowing, having the sentry gun is just so interesting, and when to activate it, when not to activate it, when to sacrifice it. Same with the bots. And just, that with the mold and with having to get oxygen tanks sometimes, and all of it. It's just like, it adds like just these nice little layers of extra depth and thinkiness for me that I really enjoy, and like really, just a little bit more to chew on, a little bit more to consider. It's really, really fun, really cool.
Yeah, I mean, as evidenced by we went over new mechanics probably for the longest we've ever rattled on about new mechanics, and just every time we talked about how cool we thought everything was, over and over. So I mean, that just goes to show there's like so many, and it's surprising because a lot of them come back, a lot of them become the new norm, but a lot of these ideas just kind of aren't present in the rest of the series, even the really cool ones. Like I don't think until White Death there's never been an abomination that like there's never really been a changing landscape as an idea. And that's like it doesn't seem like it. It's not like focused on a lot. It's a relatively short portion of the rule book, but that's like a huge part of the gameplay.
I'm curious, James. So you've cited Invader as your least favorite in the past. Is that still the case for you?
Yeah, it is for the reasons that I give. That while I like the game, I think it's fun. I have fun every time I play it. Just none of my other Zombicide groups want to play it. So if you're not playing something, then how can it be your favorite? I like to play games that other people want to play with.
Yeah, I think that's the fairest reason you could give for not liking Invader. Your friends, on the other hand, I will be hunting down, but you're off the hook.
All right, we hope you enjoyed our review of Zombicide Invader, the core game. Our next episode, we'll be reviewing and discussing the Zombicide Invader Kickstarter and expansions. And our book club mission, we're going to have a book club mission for that one. And it's going to be the campaign from the Gaming Night #2, the Xenoleaks Saga. So if you want to check that out, play along. We didn't even know that most of us didn't even know that existed until James brought it up. But yeah, you could find it online on zombicide.com, or just search for Gaming Night #2 or the Xenoleaks Saga. Yeah. And, thanks again, Nate, for joining us.
My pleasure.
And that places a closed door on this episode. Thanks so much for listening or watching. Good night, everybody.
Stay nice out there.
Happy gaming.
Stay safe. Watch for mold.
Thanks again for listening to the Zombicide Fans podcast. Zombicide Fans is an unofficial podcast and is not affiliated with or endorsed by CMON or Guillotine Games. Thank you from your hosts, Ryan Messick, Schmedley Mayers, and James Fisher, and thanks to our special guest, Nate Parks, plus our sponsor, BoardGameGoodies.shop, where listeners can save 10% with coupon code PODCAST. You can check out the show on all major podcast listening platforms and on YouTube. You can reach us at zombicidefans@gmail.com. The podcast is hosted at zombicidefans.com. Join our communities at the Zombicide Discord and the All Zombicide Games Facebook group. All links will be in the show notes. Until next time, survive.